Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting of the Municipal Council of Jasper to order. It's now 9:30. As part of today's proceedings, I'd like to acknowledge that the municipality of Jasper is on the traditional territory, meeting ground, gathering place, traveling route, and home for the Deneza, the Ewok, Anishinaabe, Sequanic, Stoney Nakoda, and Métis. Moving to agenda item 2, are there any additions to today's agenda? Your worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demoda. Having spent some time recently configuring appointments to boards and committees, it occurred to me that we ought to review our community conversation policy. We've had it for about a year. And so I would like to add as an agenda item 7.9 on the new business, a review of that policy. I have a motion to propose. I appreciate we have a long agenda, but I think it will be a quick matter, but we can get it started today perhaps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anyone else? Councillor Wilson.
No additions because it is quite a lengthy agenda, and I just would like to suggest that we have had a couple pretty fair agendas in the last month, and having all of this is a pretty substantial items and issues to review. I feel like they're probably not going to get as best of attention as they could have if we had them staggered in previous council or committee meetings. So hoping that administration could spread them out in the future a little bit better. And I appreciate that the items come up and we have to get them on, and some are busier than some agendas are busier than others, but we also do have a upcoming meeting this afternoon too. So
I share some of your sentiment. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. And I think maybe we can have a discussion at our organizational meeting later today and collectively come up with some ideas on how we can kind of balance our meetings a little bit. Great, thank you for that. Would any other councillor like to add anything to today's agenda? All right. With the addition of 7.9, community conversations policy review, may I have a motion to set today's agenda? We have a motion from Councillor Calder-Rampy. All in favor? None opposed? That's carried. All right. Next item on the agenda is item 4.0, 4.1, business arising from the minutes. Does anyone have anything to address? Any corrections or other observations? All right, having none, may I have a motion to, actually we don't need to do that. All right, we're moving quite swiftly here. Agenda item 5, delegations. 5.1, we have the food security working group members with us today, and as we kick it off, I'd like to defer to Director Reed to help us with the introduction this morning.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Demoda, and through the council. So we are joined by all of the official stakeholders that were gathered for the food security working group, and I'll go from your left to right. So we have Ryan Esch and Sasha Golitsky with the Jasper Community Food Society. We have Melody Gabry with Food Rescue, and we have Monica Rodriguez with the Food Bank. And so they are, I'm just going to hand it over to, of course, to Sasha to do the presentation.
Hello. Good morning, council. See if I can figure this one out. Okay, so I believe we have a slide presentation prepared. Emma's awesome and already has it pulled up. So we'll dive right in. My name is Sasha Galitzky. I'm a director on the Jasper Local Food Society Board and a member of the Food Security Working Group. I'll be speaking on behalf of the entire group, but we're all here for questions afterwards. Next slide, please. So the Food Security Working Group was appointed by you all. Thank you very much for to dig into food security in Jasper. We have, as Chris pointed out, representatives from each of the local food societies or groups in town: Food Bank, Food Recovery, Food Society, as well as Councillor Waxter from the council. We met a few times over the last couple of months to define food security, set out a vision for food security in Jasper, and determine what we need to do to realize our vision. And today we're bringing recommendations to council that we believe will have meaningful and lasting impact on Jasper's ability to address food security for its residents and community. Next slide, please. So we have a food security definition here from resilience.org. The part that I like the most about this definition is point 2. At the core of food security is access to healthy food and good nutrition for all. Food access is closely linked to food supply, so food security is dependent on a healthy and sustainable food system. So to me, that means that if we're going to address food security and that access piece and that for all piece, it's really about building a resilient food system. And so I want to kind of keep that in mind as we address our recommendations, because we're really looking at building a food system in order to sustainably long-term provide this food security to our town. Next slide. We have 4 recommendations for council today: background planning and research, administration and coordination, facilities and assets, and education and capacity building. So first up, for background planning and coordination, we're asking the council to consider funding the development of a food security strategy for Jasper so that future planning can be grounded in local realities and research done within Jasper for the community of Jasper specifically. I think on the community side of the table here, we've been working pretty hard to develop the capacity on our side, on the community side, to address food security. What we could use help with from the municipality, from council, is support like research on like how we can best guide our efforts. And so a food security strategy from the municipality with this kind of research work done on how we can most efficiently address these issues would be very supportive. Number 2, administration and coordination. The Food Security Working Group recommends that council consider funding a position to support food-focused nonprofit groups in town. I think anyone who's ever worked in a nonprofit as a volunteer can commiserate with how much work we do, and a lot of it's admin work, a lot of it's stuff that we don't necessarily. I think we all have a passion for food and food security, food issues, but there's a lot of admin work involved in running these food-focused groups that we could use a lot of support with, and that would free up our time and energy to kind of dig into the meat of addressing food security and food systems in our town. Having that kind of administrative support from the municipality would be tremendously meaningful in our ability to do our work as volunteers. Number 3, facilities and assets. The Food Security Working Group recommends that council direct administration to map out and catalog the resources and assets in Jasper related to food security, including places, spaces, expertise, I'll also call out barriers, as part of the development of the food security strategy. This is a piece of work that would be really hard for us volunteers to do. Having the municipal support to kind of inventory what we have to work with would be really helpful in moving forward and best using our assets and resources in town. And number 4, education and capacity building. The Food Security Working Group recommends that council direct administration to explore education and capacity building opportunities that arise within the food security strategy for Jasper and take action to support their development and delivery in the community. So this one to me is really about kind of building connections and community around food security. I think this isn't gonna, our food security issues aren't gonna be solved by the people in this room alone. It's gonna require the entire community kind of coming on board, learning about food systems, becoming a part of it. And that piece requires education and harnessing kind of the collective power of our community. So that's our final ask. Thank you, and we're ready for questions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the brief yet clear ask that we have before us today. I will open up the floor to council for any questions. Councillor Keller.
Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your presentation. I just want to ask that each of these societies are all volunteers. So the food bank is a volunteer, food recovery is volunteer, and the garden, of course, is volunteer. And we also have community dinners. Is that through costs, if I can ask Mr. Gibbons, the director? The deputy mayor?
That's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota, through to Councillor Keller MP. So community dinners are not, yes, so those are directly run through the Community Outreach Services Department, or through section of the Community Development Department. And that, may be an opportunity where some of this education or some of the effects or needs of the food security working group, that's one of the tools that may be used in the future to assist with it, but is not, it is coordinated by the Community Development Department as part of our.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for that. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I want to thank you guys so much for your tireless work. I know it's a lot. I do have questions, but I'm wondering, is that you more for the chair? Should I wait until agenda item 7.1? Like, my questions are directed more to administration. This comes up with a request for decision. Should I wait? I don't have questions for you guys. I just have lots of thank yous.
Yeah, I think I will defer to Mr. Gibbons. There you go.
Has a bad set. That's okay. Thank you very much, Director Reed. Chair Demota, for Councillor Hall. Councillor Hall, there is a request for decision that follows on the agenda. It is reflective of the recommendations that are here, and so probably discussion, debate, or questions for administration would be good at that time. I think now really is where we've got the public members that are here, and so an opportunity for council to have dialogue with that.
Go ahead.
I just have one quick question for you guys. I'm wondering if you're able to know, or how many hours do you put in a week volunteer for food security in Jasper? Like, I don't know if you have ever thought about that, or I'm just curious.
Probably at least. I would say 2 hours a day myself, but then my volunteers, additionally, like 3 volunteers twice a week, 4 hours more or more sometimes. Actually, yeah, we consider all the driving as well. A lot.
For the food bank, we actually have been serving around 85 individuals per week. So our volunteer hours are around maybe 10 hours volunteer wise. My admin work is like 120 kind of thing, just doing admin work and kind of like gathering tools that we need for every week.
Councillor Baxter, I see that that you have your hand up. I was just checking to see if anyone else had any numbers to report.
But that half of food society, I'll say, like, these guys are definitely doing the heavy lifting hours wise on a weekly basis to feed people. Our roles, we run the farmers market, we do the community garden. Obviously there's a lot of hours in the farmers market each summer, that dies off the rest of the year, so it's a lot more consistent.
Yeah, the community garden hours are more in the spring, so spring is 20 hours a week, and then on the summer, garden doesn't stay. And then the fall, I do a bit more, maybe average 10 hours a week.
Oh, wow, okay. Collectively, it's quite a few hours of contribution to the community. Appreciate that. Councillor Waxer, all the way from Toronto.
Yes, I wanted to express appreciation and admiration to the working group. It was a true pleasure to work with the people on that committee, and it was comforting to know that there are people with such passion and enthusiasm and dedication to addressing food security in our community, and I was very appreciative of the time spent there. I also, I felt that this work was very much addressed an important piece of our strategic plan, which was support for the vulnerable and ensuring that the vulnerable don't become more vulnerable. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer. Appreciate that. Does anyone else have any other questions? Councillor Wilson.
As the group's just forming, maybe it might be too early to ask this question, but has the Food Security Network or the member groups individually received any outside funding grants from provincial government, other opportunities in that way?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Wilson. We struggle with funding and grant writing just because we're volunteers and we don't have expertise in that field. We also don't have time. We've had, you just speaking for Food Society, we've had a number of occasions in the last even just 6 months where we've had opportunities for grants, and we've been like, okay, we should really apply for this. This is right down our alley. And we just, people are busy, and it's just really hard to actually get the ducks in a row to make it happen. I think one of the things we're again, our ask number 2 is for a position from the municipality that could potentially help with that type of expertise, because most volunteer boards don't tend to have grant writing, fundraising expertise on board. So that's, number 2 would really, really help us with that, I think. The other thing is, I think we are talking amongst ourselves, it's an early conversation, but kind of coming together into some sort of food alliance or food hub that would allow us to kind of pool our energy, pool our time and resources, and work towards common goals more efficiently. If, hopefully that would ease the process of raising funds, but right now it's a struggle.
That's good information. Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Just one more question in regards to that. Are any of your organizations a society?
Yeah, Food Society is, I believe we're the only one. Food Bank may also be a society.
Okay, thank you.
Are you asking for charitable number?
Well, a lot of times when you apply for grants, as you were saying, you don't have the expertise, but through a society, you have to be a society a lot of the time in order to get grants. So that's why I was asking.
Your worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dora. Thank you for the presentation and the PowerPoint. It really is clear, and I thank you for that. I will say, though, that I struggle a bit with context. So your first meeting and your first challenge was to define food security in the Jasper context. And I still can't wrap my arms around it. So food security is a global problem, as is a climate change. And so we can tackle that presumably at a local level. But from the definition that you provided, I struggle to find what food security means in the Jasper context. And I really did appreciate your focus on the second of the bullet points, the food system. But even then, there's only really 2 parts of that system that occur locally. That's acquisition and consumption. Admittedly, we could work on some local production, and there's stuff out there now about vertical farms and all that kind of stuff. And it's quite exciting, and it would be challenging to enter into that, particularly since we don't have a land base, but interesting opportunities. But still, I see the definition as so broad that even if we did have a staff person somehow engaged, what parameters would you see us setting on them? Because we cannot tackle from our small town a global issue, from my perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Bear Island. I think in our efforts to make our presentation both brief and clear, we had to focus things very, very concisely. And I think there's a lot more to share that your question gives us an opportunity to do. So I think in my mind, a lot of this comes down to, I think at the base, there's a foundation of a food system. And I do think there actually is a lot of opportunity to build that in Jasper, though we do have some pretty clear barriers in terms of being located in a national park. I'm happy to speak to that more if we want to. But I think on top of that, there's kind of that urgent food need that comes up. And I think that's what we're really seeing is a lot of urgent need. And that comes back to like looking back at that definition slide, the access to food for all. I think, this ties in a lot of other conversations I'm sure you guys are involved in, but cost of living in Jasper is very high, and I think a lot of our residents are having to choose between paying rent and paying for food. And so I think that's the access piece, like food security is about access to food at its very core. And I think a lot of our community is struggling with that, just from an affordability perspective. So I think building a more resilient food system, making sure we're able to address that urgent need when it arises, that to me is what we're building. And I think it has, there's a lot of details to that. I'm happy to go into that if you want to. It could take half an hour. I don't want to take too much of your time, but we do have a pretty broad vision for what we could achieve in 4 years or 10 years in terms of building out a more resilient food system that would be able to address both urgent need and also reduce urgent need by creating a broader foundation of support. Yeah, let me know how much you want to know, and I will happily go into more detail.
Thank you for that. I think that is sufficient for me. I think it's an appreciation that even though we can ascribe a broad all-encompassing definition, the local issue, as you've indicated, is access to food, and that is at least part economic access. And so if we are to adopt the recommendations, you would be accepting of the fact that there would be a more narrow focus than might be suggested by the broad definition.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that.
Excuse me. Thank you for that, Your Worship. I have Councillor Waxer and then Councillor Bonnett. Go ahead.
I just thought I would speak briefly to the Councillor Wilson's question around proposal writing. I think one of the challenges in the context of a small community is that an organization like a food bank might attract people who are interested in providing ensuring people have access to food, and may be interested in stocking shelves and organizing systems and handing out food. But one of the challenges is that in the context of a small community, they often don't have the resources that a food bank in a larger city would have, maybe someone dedicated to writing proposals, because proposal writing is in fact a specialized skill that not everybody has, not every person possesses or is comfortable with. So that's been my experience over the years in the context of a small community, is you have similar organizations to a larger city, but don't have all of the resources that a larger city and a larger scale might provide.
Thank you for that, Councillor Waxer. Councillor Bonnett.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota, and thank you to the group for participating and bringing this to council. In June, one of the things we heard when we formed this committee was there was a concern about volunteer burnout. And the closest thing I see to addressing that would probably be Item number 1, food security working group recommending that council consider funding development of a food security strategy. I take it in that is where looking at how we can reinforce the group with additional volunteers or a steady volunteer base so that we avoid the burnout. Because really the basis of what you are doing with your groups relies on volunteers being available to make things happen. And I just want to make sure we capture that going forward, that we need to somehow attract more people to be able to participate, to make sure that this is a very strong working group as we move forward. Through the summer, did you experience like the burnout? Did you lose people, or did you add people? Were you able to attract additional individuals? Because again, this type of working group really depends on the amount of volunteers that are able to help.
I don't think like my group personally doesn't have a problem attracting volunteers and keeping them, but I don't know. I think for the food bank, it has been a struggle. Like sometimes during the summer, because I get it, everyone's having fun and everything. We have some really committed volunteers like helping every week. But I am hoping that, you know, by putting all these groups together, maybe we could have like a broader base of volunteers rather than having them separate. So, you know, but by having the people that volunteer at the local society, the recovery, the food bank, maybe we have this solid group that instead of being separated, we can reach out to them like in one way. We're hoping that this administration, this person that will help us maybe can coordinate that, right? So the ones that are already like internal part of it can dedicate that time to other matters, right? Like organize them further and do things that they like more, right? Than just being there every week. Yeah, for Food Society, we have 8 board members, and at our meetings and the board meetings in the spring, we would have pretty good attendance, like usually 7 or 8 people. In our last board meeting last Wednesday, we had 4. So I do think there's a lot of burnout for us just in terms of meeting attendance. I also want to call out that I do think that all of the recommendations would help with volunteer burnout. I think because I think a lot of the things address work that we know we need to do to support the communities we support, to support the issues that we believe in, but that we don't have time to do ourselves. So if municipality probably could support us by helping us with these tasks, with these asks, I think we would be much more empowered to do our work better without risking volunteer burnout. Like we would love to have an inventory. We would love to have this research into like what works elsewhere. We would love to have support with funding, fundraising, and grant writing. Those are all things that like we could do so much if we have those things, but we don't have time. We don't have the energy. And these are the areas we've identified that the municipality could really help us with and enable us to do our work much more powerfully.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Kind of touching back on what Councillor Wax was saying, I wonder if, because I see nonprofit groups in Jasper as like bringing immense value to our community. I wonder if this position could also support other nonprofit groups. I don't know how much. I wonder if it would be a full-time position for the food group, or if it could actually support other nonprofits. Because I'm sure other nonprofits are going through the same thing.
I appreciate that thought, and you know, I also, this is good timing for us, and we have a big agenda item there at 7.1 to discuss with administration, and the feedback and information that we have here is really helpful for us. And I commend you for the effort that you put in here and getting together. I know it's not easy getting everybody together to get things done. So just even from our level, sometimes it's a bit of a struggle to get everybody on one page and get things signed off and done. So you know, the quality of the presentation here today is really good for us, and I'm grateful. Thank you. And, before I finish off, if anyone else has anything to add or ask Councillor Waxer, just want to make sure that at a distance you're not left out.
No, I think I'm comfortable. I have maybe a few more things to say when it comes up on the agenda further down, but again, sincere appreciation to the working group and also to administration for excellent work and passion and enthusiasm.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer. Councillor Wilson?
Sorry for the late question. Is this collaboration of the groups a model that's happening elsewhere, other communities? And if so, do you have other community examples that we can kind of do the research?
Absolutely. There's one just down the road, the Bow Valley Food Alliance has really, they're a couple years ahead of us, but I think they're a great model for what we'd like to achieve. They have a paid position, I think maybe 1.5 paid positions. They have a food charter that the municipalities of Banff, Canmore, and I think they're trying, some other ones are all signing on to. It's the full Bow Valley. It's not just Banff, for example, so slightly different mandate. But yeah, look them up. They've got a lovely website and they've done some really good work.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mayor?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to again thank the group and encourage you to stick around, although I presume you were going to anyway, but with the consent of the chair, there might be further questions after we commence item 7.1. Like Councillor Hall, I have questions for administration, but there might be a desire to engage you in some of those discussions as well. So I just encourage you to stick around for them.
Yeah, some portion of us will definitely be sticking around and we're happy to answer any questions.
All right, he said what I wanted to say, so that's great. Brian, Sasha, Melody, Monica, I really appreciate your time and hopefully you stick around for some more great fun that we have here. Okay. Before we move on to agenda item 5.2, may I have a motion from council to receive today's presentation from the food security working group?
Is that not part of the agenda item 7.1?
I did it.
It's on the agenda for 7.1.
Okay.
So
It's on the agenda for some, but all right. So we don't need to do that right now. So up next, we have the outdoor ice rink proposal as part of our agenda item 5.2. Mr. Olson, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Not really proposal per se, it's more, I just want to bring some more attention to trying to get an outdoor rink built. I did a proposal maybe two and a half years ago. I can't quite remember what it was, but I think COVID kind of kicked things down the road a bit, and I understand that. I just, I did think I was gonna have a little more time this winter, so I was gonna kind of really get into it. Just power outage kind of put a little wrench in a lot of that. I mean, it was a little tighter, but for that, I just contacted the company that builds outdoor rinks to get a better idea of what we're looking at. And they came back with a quote that's based on what they thought would work for our community. And to be honest, I think it's a lot less than what price-wise than what I was thinking. So I'm just trying to bring this to light more. That here's a quote. This is not a major project. We're probably the largest community in Alberta that doesn't have an outdoor rink, or two, I would say, maybe 2 or 3 hockey rinks, outdoor rinks for a community our size. So I just wanted to send this to town council. Hopefully, you've got builders, you've got people here that do things. I'm just trying to push the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Is there anything that you wanted to address in the presentation that we have here today? Like,
You know what, honestly, this is just a quote from another company.
Yeah.
And it shows that, you know, they asked a lot of questions, you know, when I gave them, just a basic guide. I just gave them some details of what I thought would be needed for a community like this. It's the climate and whatnot. We would need a refrigeration system. Not, you could do a portable system, but that would be taken down, I think, on a regular basis. It just takes 1 year, people getting too busy to put it back up. I think it's a more permanent solution is something I would recommend, but that's not up for me to say. This is just a quote. I really don't know much about it. This is from a company that says this is how much it's gonna cost. I just want an outdoor rink. So, and the proposal I did about why it's good for the community, I did a couple years ago. I don't think we can go over that all again. I think if you want me to, we can get back into that. But
Thank you for that. I don't know how we would go forward in proposing this for a budget consideration, or there's a lot of things that we would need to consider, and maybe if I defer to administration on what our next steps could be.
Sure, Deputy Mayor Demota. You know, I appreciate the community coming forward with ideas. I think the next step would be for today, council could receive the presentation for information, could refer it back to administration for report to the future committee meeting. That way administration would have an opportunity to review the quote and provide council with a bit more analysis of how this might fit into the municipality's current planning and budget cycle. Obviously, budget is fairly well in development. So it is a bit late in the year to be adding a significant project like this, but it is capital in nature, and so that's completely possible. And the budget is, you know, not done until council says that it's done. The other things that I'd note, just from a quick review of the documentation consent, there are a number of items that are not included in the quotation. So there's some numbers there. There are a couple that stood out. There's a couple of sections that stood out to me that identify that there's some, you know, concrete base that would need to be done, and a bunch of other things that in the quote are listed as by others. So administration would need to have a look at, you know, what those actual costs would be. The other thing that is currently underway that council may wish to sort of the administration would certainly bring the council's attention. We are also doing planning for Robson and Lions Parks. I know that the consultants are going out to community engagement with some very soon, if they haven't already, with some concepts. And so there may be an opportunity to bring this idea together with those concepts. So I think today would be to receive the presentation, to acknowledge that there is a presentation from a community group, and then to refer the issue to administration for report back to the future committee.
That's great. And you did make reference to, you know, capital considerations, but there would be ongoing operational costs as well. And, you know, where those get assumed and how we would go about that, administering that would also be a challenge, and being part of budget discussions as well. So I like the fact that there might be opportunities out there where we can incorporate something like this or other things that can have community author or contribution to the community. So thank you, Mr. Olson, for bringing this forward. Don't worry, I'm not going to cut anybody off. I'm going to be asking for a motion. But Councillor Wilson, go ahead.
Or maybe questions first. No, my question was just thoughts on location for you. I know, you know, I think Robson Park, there's currently a, you know, pretty basic rink. Were you thinking you know?
you know what, I think whoever's doing some of this probably have a better say of where they want. I like somewhere close to downtown, somewhere close to school, somewhere the kids can go after school, you know, when they bring their kids to school, leave, second place to go or whatever after work in school. I also think that this is something that could probably be, we could probably raise a lot of money pretty easily. This hockey in Jasper, I think is something that sponsorship wise, like whatever we can come up with as a community through municipality could probably be matched or pressed or more from the community too. So but I do like that thought. Obviously there's we've got a huge park with it's not being used, all the space is not being used that well over at Centennial. There's space there. There's space in a number of places. There's a lot of spaces that you guys have. I don't know where would be best. But
Yeah, and just to throw one more place out there, the current skate park, it could be up for grabs if we can raise enough money, and so maybe jump on board with boosting them out of their position and getting them in a new area, and then you guys could have the location where the old skate park could be, but that's an idea.
okay, I don't know. You say you guys, like,
No,
I'm more speaking for the.
No, you said that, you know.
I know it's like, here, I've got a group to build a rink. No, I'm just a person trying to get you guys to build it. So I can help out a little bit.
Sounds like it's not his first rodeo. I've only been to one myself. Go ahead, Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And as long as that outdoor rink becomes a basketball court in the summertime. Okay. Yeah, I like any outdoor accessible recreational facility that's accessible for our town is great. I know we had talked, I think the works is in the works, have a skating surface at Lions Park. I'm looking at you, Director Reed. Was it an idea to maybe allow hockey on that surface this winter?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota through the Councillor Hall. That is correct. The plan as it stands now is to make what we would call leisure ice at Robson Park, with Robson Park being more of a gathering park than it is what we might call sporty park. And that existing basketball court in Lions Park is a pretty good substrate to make a rink on, and it's rectangular, so it's more in line with what we would call a shitty rink. There are no plans to create boards or anything like that at this.
You Mayor, your worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for that. Thank you, Mr. Olson, for coming back again. I appreciate it. That's been a couple of years, but I'm glad that you haven't lost interest in it. And a second sheet of ice would be beneficial, I think, generally speaking, in the community, particularly one that could still be used in the off season for other sports. What really seems to be the change now with this proposal, if that's what it is the refrigeration aspect. Because that to me changes everything. As I read this proposal from the customary place, refrigeration requires 4 10-ton units. And there's going to be refrigeration components in there, including, I suppose, freon and gases that have to be really carefully controlled. And you need a big spot to put 4 10-ton units. Alliance Park does not seem to be readily adaptable to 4 10-ton mechanical units sitting in the field in a residential neighborhood that are full of freon. And so there are some practical limitations. What would really assist me is if, and you've got some contact with this customized ink, if they can provide you with another community that has done this, and I would be prepared to talk to elected people there to figure out how they did it, to see what options might be available before we task our own administration, which has its own capacity issues, to start looking in depth in this. The photograph that is there looks great, a bunch of kids playing shinny, but doesn't show 4 10-ton refrigeration units. I don't know where they've hidden them, but they're not in the picture. I'd like to know how that works, and I'd like to get some information about, as Deputy Mayor Demota said, the operational cost. What does it take to run those units for a year? And as I say, if you can find me contact people in other communities, I'd be prepared to do that work and save our administration, just so I get a better understanding. And all I need from you is your existing contact tell us where they built such a unit in a small town previously. I can make the calls from them.
Sure. Actually, been trying to get that quote done, looking through, they sent me examples of like dozens of rinks they've done, all across Canada and in the US actually. Many rinks in small town Alberta, small town BC. So a simple click on the website will get you that, but I can forward you his contact info. I don't know to who, but and pass him to you guys. Yeah.
Thank you for these insightful questions. I might have one for administration, maybe for Director Reed. From your knowledge and what we are getting as a new ice plant, is there a capacity built within that to facilitate something like an outdoor rink near that area?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota. Short answer is no, it wasn't designed for that. The longer answer is you'll even see in this proposal that you kind of need the plant to be about 20 feet away before you start to really lose efficiency. So if you wanted to put the rink on the road, then maybe we could expand some of the capacity in that existing or the new ice plant. But the short answer, no. Longer answer, unlikely.
Yeah, there have been some suggestions in the past to maybe look at those options when it comes to our street. So I really appreciate the presentation, the info that we have here, and we have a lot of work to consider this. So do we have any other questions? Councillor Hall.
The question for administration, thank you, Deputy Mayor. The ice surface we have in Robson Park, how is it maintained? Is it just they pour water on it, it freezes, they shovel snow off? You know, there's no plant there, but what's the maintenance for the winter on that surface?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through Councillor Hall. That's correct. This is what we call a natural rink. So we hope that we get cold weather. We lay down water in the cold weather. We hope the cold weather lasts. And, you know, when you have a plant, it does guarantee you can freeze that surface. But in our case, none of our outdoor rinks have ever been or are planned to be that way.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Wilson.
I'm not a refrigeration expert, but with this type of refrigeration, maybe you guys can weigh in. I don't believe that you're talking Freon and all this, like, is it more like a, you know, just there's refrigerant obviously, but more kind of refrigerant you'd have for a walk-in cooler for like that we have at a restaurant or whatnot, where we've got, in that sense, I've got like I've got 3 10-ton refrigeration units on top of Earl's, for example. And I know that Freon isn't something that I'm readily concerned about at Earl's. I've got, you know, so I'm assuming these are not quite the same sort of plant you're talking about, like a hockey rink. This is just running cold, through, I don't know, glycol or whatnot through tubes underneath the ice to cool it down. So I just wanted to mention that. Maybe you
No. I don't. All right. Anyone else? Anything? Well, you know, I could just finish off by saying I was quite fortunate to grow up around a multitude of outdoor rinks as growing up. My skating quality, you know, would never show that. Even being from Winnipeg, I get asked often, like, why are you such a crappy skater? Just some people are better at it than others. So I appreciate you putting us in a shiny situation. And I look forward to having discussions with administration and having the budget conversations and what the opportunities might be for our community. I think this is a great opportunity for Jasper. Before I sign off, I wanted to see if Councillor Waxer had anything to add. I often don't look to the screen, so I just want to make sure that you weren't left out.
No, just that I fully appreciate the value of outdoor recreation and outdoor recreation that's free for residents to access easily. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Olson. Would anyone like to put forward a motion to accept this and maybe direct administration to bring us forward with other opportunities? Mr.
Yeah, at minimum, I think Councillor acknowledged the presentation with the motion to receive for information. And then if there was any additional work that council wanted administration to undertake, then you could have a following motion to direct something to administration. But I think the minimum is to receive a presentation for information.
Councillor,
Yeah, I make a motion to receive the presentation as information, and I think Mayor Ireland may do some background research, and we wouldn't want this conversation to fall, off. So maybe let's have a conversation return to a future committee of the whole meeting after maybe council has done their homework. I guess we'll say we won't have to put any, like, I don't think we need to have to put anything on administration at this point, but I'd like to see the conversation carry on at a future committee of the whole.
all right, so I think just for administration's clarity, you're proposing that committee of the whole accept the proposal for an outdoor rink in the community of Jasper. Do you want to put that in your own words?
Well, really, the motion is just that we accept the presentation for information received.
Do you have that? Do you have that recorded for your notes?
The presentation for information.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Thank you, Mr. Olson. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, administration. Mr. Mayor.
Before Mr. Olson leaves, I understood Councillor Wilson to have a second part to the motion, and I would invite him to conclude with the direction, or I will.
I think I'd like to put it in your hands because you were the one who volunteered. I wanted to do some work as well, yet let's put it into your words so there's more clarity.
Although I did volunteer and I maintain that when I go through the work, I think the appropriate way to do this is to direct administration to work with the proponent, Mr. Olson, to acquire additional information and return to a future committee of the whole meeting. And not part of the motion, but when we get that additional information, contact information, I'm happy to follow up with some other communities just to see how they might have been able to engage on similar questions in their communities.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Gibbon, you'd like to add something?
But just a question for clarification, in the motion, Your Worship, you're saying and return to a future committee of the whole meeting. Sounds like you're asking us to find some contact information or comparative communities. Could we circulate that to council via email, or are you looking for a formal RFD or report at a future committee of the whole meeting on this topic?
The latter, so less formal. All I meant to suggest is just get it on another agenda, get the information. I'm happy to follow up. We can share that with councilors, and everybody can follow up if they want, if they have more information. We just need the contact information, and we need the certainty that this matter will get placed on another committee of the whole agenda after we've got that information. So your job, get us the contact information and give it to us, and
no staff report or RFP, just a line item on an agenda. Do you have a sense of when, how long council will need to do their own research? Like, is this a next committee of the whole meeting? Is this a before the 2022 meeting? Or is this a early 2022 meeting? Or is it, or maybe council would like to add that when they feel that they've done the research that they'd like.
I would personally be prepared to be back at this in 2 weeks' time. At which time we might then have some more specific direction for administration.
That's all. So at a future committee of the whole in 2 weeks. Great.
Okay, that, from keeping the mayor for repeating the motion, we can get that documented a little more clearly if no one understands it. Or if some don't understand it. If everybody understands, can I call the motion? All in favor? And, you know, thank you for your patience, Mr. Olson, but you can see coming forward in this fashion makes it a little bit more difficult. And I'm grateful this is here, but when you have a group coming with an official ask, it makes it a lot easier for administration and council. So it might look a little clumsy to us or to everybody else, but we will we'll get something a little bit more gathered.
No problem. I did a proposal before, put some time into it, and
Yeah.
didn't really go anywhere. So I figured maybe like let's have to into this one. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah.
If you need me to help out with something, I can help.
Fundraising. Okay. All right. Take care. All right, have we concluded with 5.2? Does anybody else have anything that they would want to address or direct? We don't have to be a little hasty and moving along. So. Okay, so we're finished with the delegations for today. Does council have any correspondence that they'd like to share? We don't have anything official on the agenda right now, to my knowledge. Your worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demoda. I just wanted to take this opportunity to acknowledge an email that I received from Superintendent Fair last week that didn't make it onto the agenda, and I just sent that now to all of council. Now it seems to be lost from my phone, but in any event, the essence of the email from the superintendent was to acknowledge and thank the working relationship that developed between Parks Canada and the municipality during the Chatham wildfire. And the superintendent was very gracious in his praise to our staff for the way they work together with Parks Canada in really trying circumstances. And I wanted to acknowledge his thanks and also acknowledge and give thanks to our own staff, led by Director Nadon and Chief Conte in the ECC, but with great support from community development and the reception center that was opened and everybody that was part of the ECC. It really was an impressive internal display, but externally the coordination with Parks Canada was exceptional. So lots of thanks to go around, and I just wanted to take an opportunity to publicly acknowledge the thanks that we received from the superintendent.
Thank you, Mayor Arnold. Appreciate that. Does anybody have anything to add? Okay, thank you. Before we move on to new business, I'm just checking with council if this might be a good opportunity for a brief break, or we deal with 7.1 and then go on for the sake of the people who are here presenting earlier.
Volunteers.
That's right. Well,
Thanks.
Well, they might enjoy a coffee.
That's right.
Not strong enough.
Yes. All right, well, I just wanted to give the opportunity there. So that will bring us to new business agenda item 7.1, Food Security Working Group recommendations. I am going to move to Director Reed.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Demota, and through the council. So the item before you is, of course, the Food Security Working Group. And the recommendations are that committee receive the recommendations from the Food Security Working Group for information, and that committee refer the recommendations to the 2023 budget discussion. I won't read verbatim the whole report, but council will remember that you heard an initial presentation. You struck a working group. The working group has met repeatedly and delivered the presentation to you earlier this meeting. Under discussion, you will see that we have included the Food Security Working Group recommends that Council 1, consider funding the development of food security strategy. 2, consider funding a position to support food-focused nonprofit groups in the community. 3, direct administration to map out and catalog resources or asset map. And 4, direct administration to explore education capacity building opportunities that arise within the food security strategy and take action to support their development and delivery in the community. We've got some strategic relevance, of course. Community health, take proactive steps to reduce the risk of people becoming vulnerable and respond when they are. Relationships, community, communicate and engage with residents. And under relationships, welcome the expertise, innovation, creativity, commitment of community members, groups and associations. And I think in the presentation earlier today, I certainly was pleased to see how that expertise is very quickly expressed in what we might consider layman terms. The costs associated with these recommendations have not yet been incorporated in the 2023 budget. And we have attached the Food Security Working Group terms of reference and of course the presentation from earlier today. And I'm open to what I understand to be some questions.
I understood that too. Thank you very much for going over that for us. Councillor, some of you had mentioned earlier that you have some things to address here. I will start with you, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Regarding recommendation number 1, although I wasn't on council at the time, I remember that council created a childcare strategy out of COVID relief money. Is there still some of that money available to potentially create this kind of strategy?
Deputy Mayor Demota for Councillor Hall. I think if council's interested in any of the actions that are, potential actions that are identified in the report, really it would be to refer that specific action to administration, and then administration to identify an appropriate funding source. So we may be able to fund it from existing sources. We may be able to get a grant to fund it. We may have to fund it from, reserves. If council is interested in doing something, you can refer that something to us, and then we can come up with an appropriate recommendation for an appropriate funding source.
Okay. Yeah.
Two more questions. if that's
Sure.
okay. A couple more.
I don't see any other hands up. So.
Oh, there we go. And I guess I did address this a little bit in the presentation about support for nonprofit groups in town, and thinking out loud that it might be beneficial to other nonprofit groups. Maybe this position isn't just for food security. I don't know what that would look like. That's my one question. My other one was number 3. I seem to recall maybe coming out of a community conversation, there is an inventory of spaces happening, or is going to happen, or has happened. Am I correct in that?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota. Through to Councillor Hall. So the first question was, I think it could be easily answered with yes, at community conversations and also through our work at community development. We do have a similar sense of the, we would call it the obvious gap in the ability to find someone to write funding reports or rather grant applications. The ability for someone to easily and quickly write the annual reporting that is required for nonprofit societies. So yes, this is a known I was going to say gap in our community, but it's a known challenge throughout the region and the country. And so yes, there is certainly this aligns with that need that is expressed in other non-food related societies throughout our community. And then your second question. about an asset map or inventory. That is correct. As part of the website project, we are developing a somewhat interactive map to guide certainly, especially our newcomers around the community to find where is the indoor skating and the outdoor skating and where is the food bank. However, it is not focused specifically on what this particular ask is, which is what are the assets across the whole definition of assets that would relate and assist and coordinate and be part of a food security strategy. So yes, we're going to make a map. It would need to be augmented to meet this request. And certainly could be.
Thank you, Councillor Hall, your worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. My question to Director Reed. Are you the same Christopher Reed who with his wife Claudia dominated the trivia contest against astrophysicists and astronauts? Starting, oh, look at you are.
I didn't know we were going to do that now.
I didn't know that you had the belt.
I was told to get a picture with council if I could.
So you are that,
great.
you are that same person.
Yes, and I'm applying all of that incredible skill at trivia to my job now in front of me.
Thank you for that. I do have some relevant questions. The recommendation is to refer the request to budget. The first two, I can understand. They are both funding specific. And there is no cost currently embedded in the budget for that. But is there a known cost, an estimated cost? Has anybody done any costing? And what if we were to direct you to bring it forward to budget? Would you just bring forward a principle, or would you be able to bring forward something that has been costed?
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Demota, through to your worship. As part of our budget work, we have been costing various staff positions and other options to present to council. And so would we be able to bring you something more fully developed rather than a concept? Yes, we would. That's partly why this presentation came now, so that we would have enough time to get you real qualitative information for your budget deliberations.
All right, thank you for that. And for the third and fourth recommendations, those at least to me to be more capacity issues than necessarily funding issues. So the mapping, for example, you indicated that is ongoing, but it's not specific to facilities or assets that would be directly connected to food security. And the education capacity building would rest, I think, again, on our internal capacity to contribute to that. So can you speak at all to our internal capacity to promote those objectives absent of budget consideration?
Thank you again, Deputy Mayor Demota, through to your worship. That's a great question. The short answer is that is why these are together. Our current capacity would not allow us to just do number 4, say. And really, without the food strategy, we'd be relying on a great, incredible core of volunteers to tell us which shots to take with what limited capacity we would have. So number 1 and number 2, the recommendations 1 and 2, then make recommendation 3 and 4 actionable. But without 1 and 2, they would be far less organized.
Thank you. And not true.
Councillor Waxer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota. a couple of thoughts I had is that the urgency about this issue was vetted by a number of groups saying the same thing, and also the same scenario playing out across the country. I also recognize that the definition of food security is quite broad, and that there may be support required by other not-for-profits in the community to address the broader impacts of the broader concepts expressed within that, the work that's required in the broader concept of food security. And also to acknowledge that while it's important to recognize what other communities are doing around food security, it's also important to ensure that we invest the time in creating a solution that fits best in our unique Jasper context. And yeah, and again, appreciation to the group for all of their passion and hard work in this field to ensure that the people that we live with are well cared for.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer. If other councillors are forming questions or gathering thoughts, I would just like to maybe ask or just get some information from you, Director Reed, on if we already have the capacity within our own operations to help facilitate some of that probably would have been addressed already. And I'm just thinking, because of some of the past work that was done in the community, a lot by former Director Waxer and her method of gathering drops to fill the bucket, would there be provincial or federal opportunities for grant funding to maybe assist in a position or an enhancement of a position in our municipal operations to assist in this area?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota. And the short answer is there may be. The first short answer is yes, that's correct. If we had the capacity, we would have already acted. And in a similar, or as a very specific example, Food Rescue needed a space for the fridge that was bear-proof in essence. We had the capacity to create that solution. We did. So you're right. When we can, we do. We don't have the capacity to go any further at this time. And should there be grants, myself and Ms. Riddell and the whole team are almost constantly scanning the grant environment to find and maximize any opportunities available. So yes, when we bring this back to budget, we may be able to report that we found a couple of opportunities. There may not be any right now. So I think I've answered the question.
Thank you. Yes, you did. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota. As we move forward with this, and I'm sure this will trigger our policy F-104 regarding relationships with external groups, that we would be entering into a formal relationship with either the collective, which was a temporary working group, or relationships with each of the working groups, so that there's a clear understanding of what municipalities providing and so on. I just wanted to make sure that that's on the table for clarity.
Deputy Mayor Demota through to Councillor Melnick. Indeed, in much the same way, this working group was struck with the terms of reference supported by council. We would either use existing policies or as needed terms of reference or other semi-contractual agreement to ensure we have the clarity of who's doing what, who's who in the zoo, whose role is what exactly. Absolutely correct.
And just to follow up, if that's the case, in this working group may have to become more formalized as one of our ongoing committees. which is why I bring up the point, either how we would address the formal relationship, which I think we can probably review at the organizational meeting later today.
Yeah, I like the thought behind that. If someone, I think later would like to bring a motion for that, and I'm not sure that even after the organizational meeting, if I think we still have the room to build in a committee and go forward. I don't think we have to wait a year as well. I'm obviously looking at the mayor because he's got a lot of experience in that area, council. Does anybody, while I'm waiting for his thoughts, does anybody else have some questions regarding that? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm still considering that, but I'm still considering earlier comments, and it's a concern, and it doesn't necessarily impact the decision that we have to make on this issue. But if there was capacity, we would already have done it. Concerns me in the sense that that is a bit of a recipe for service creep, it seems to me. And so I think that it is important that council be intentional about what services we deliver and to what extent. And so I can appreciate that food security is concern in the community, but it is not a service that we have in any direct sense adopted yet. There are always questions about whose jurisdiction really is it. I certainly directly, I'll come back to. I mean, we kind of say that we've supported the food bank, but perhaps we have. I mean, we dipped our toe in the water, but this seems to be an expansion of the service, and there's many services that are community used, including, for example, mental health services. But that doesn't mean that we necessarily engage particularly when there's another order of government that's responsible for that. So if this goes as I expect and we refer the matter to budget, that is fine. I'm just suggesting that we be quite intentional about the services that we provide, because realistically, it is limitless. Everybody has needs, and we cannot address all needs for all people. I'm just recommending for a further debate, whether it's at the organization meeting or at some other time, that we approach this with intentionality and with deliberateness, so that we do not find ourselves to enter the path without real reflection. And I mean, this might be a path that we want to take. I'm not arguing against that. I'm just saying that our process should be very deliberate.
And maybe I created some confusion in my line of questioning, because I think I intended that if there was the capacity, it would be presented to us, for an opportunity. And I didn't want to muddy the waters by saying you would have already done it. But I do appreciate the fact too that I kind of messed that up, and we're getting more clarity on that now. Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota and Your Worship. I would like to be very deliberate and clear. When I say can do, we will. Can means very clearly we have the scope, of the capacity, the authority, and the budget. So it doesn't mean that I like the idea. It means that we believe already we've been told we can do it. We have the budget and staffing capacity to do it. So I made a very quick comment that said where we can, we do. And that is genuinely true, but only when we define the word can as I have the scope, authority, and budget. So just to put that out there for everyone listening and in the room, when we say a quick sentence like when we can, we do, I want everyone to understand what we mean by that is within scope, authority, and budget.
And right now, we don't until we get a budget for it.
Deputy Mayor Demoto, that's exactly right. As administration has reported that there are no funds currently dedicated to any of these activities. And I guess the other thing that, Directors Reed said, within the scope and authority, there's also that element of council's priorities. And so, council has priorities that say that this, specifically that something should be done, we can identify that. That goes into that idea of scope. So we don't need council to approve every single thing administration does. We certainly do look to your priorities for indications of the types of things that we want to do. And Director Reed has sort of reflected that in the report in terms of the strategic relevance, which really is around relationships. The work with the Food Security Working Group is an example of building relationships within the community, and administration is fully capable of doing that. The council will note that there isn't anything specific to food security in council's strategic plan. There are items around reducing the risk of people becoming vulnerable. And so administration can see that and acknowledge that. But this is one of those areas where if council wants us to get into expending funds and dedicating resources to specific work on food security, then we probably need a bit more clarity of direction. And there's an opportunity for council to provide that by referring something to budget and considering the issue there, whether that's development of a strategy first that would lay out the next steps, or whether it would be the funding of the position or whatever it is.
That's great. And, I have to say to council that, again, the effort that we put in April, earlier this year at our strat planning sessions to, have something or the opportunity for something like this to come forward and be something constructive for the community and all the other components to it. Like, it just goes to show, that proper planning could really help the future of our community. And again, thank administration and the rest of you for, the effort that's been put there. And I think we have a really good strat plan. And I really like the fact that we're addressing those items in there and adapting them to where we can in the community. So I'm more and more grateful. So that people in the community question why we have to go away to go and do that. Sometimes it's good to get out of where we are to get a broader scope on what we need for our community. So good things come from that. Before we move on, Councillor Waxer, did you have something? I wasn't sure if I saw your hand up.
You didn't, but I guess I was thinking of a question, and that question would be through you to Director Reed or CAO Given. Do you see this position in recommendation 2 as a time limited position or an ongoing position?
That's a good question. Thank you for that, Mr. Gibbon. You look like you wanted to ask.
Yeah, no, I'll respond on behalf of the administration. At this time, administration hasn't made a determination. Frankly, we've had a request from a community group. It's up to council to decide if you want administration to do additional work on that request. And again, as with funding, if it's something that council is interested in, you can refer it to administration. We can do some work and would present to you a budget on what our recommendation might be. And it could be any number of different approaches. So administration hasn't yet assessed whether this would be a time limited position, whether this could work. This work could fit under some other position that administration might propose, whether this work could be an enhancement to a current part-time position. So administration hasn't had a chance to do that because we're waiting to see ultimately if this is something council wants us to follow up on and do that. And that's why we would like that opportunity to have some space to do that examination and present to you a budget. And you'll see that that's reflected in the recommendation report.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Councillor Waxer. Any follow-up? No, okay. Councillor Malik.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demoto. Just to close with, the working group did have a set term to December of 2022. So in administration's deliberation, how that will be presented, if this group needs to be extended, that should be part of it, or as I mentioned, if it's going to be relationships with individual groups, that should be clearly defined and what administration will bring to council.
Thank you. Right. Commenting on that, we do have a recommendation with 2 parts. As I'm not allowed right now to move. Councillor Baxter.
I was thinking that I could make the motion that committee receive the recommendation from the Food Security Working Group for information, and that committee refer the recommendations to the 2023 budget discussions.
Thank you for that. The motion's on the floor. Does anybody have anything they'd like to debate or discuss? Okay. Thought I saw some hesitation with Mr. Mayor. Okay. Call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for sticking around. Appreciate it. It is now 10:56. I'd like to call council back in 10 minutes. We'll take a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 10:06. 11:06. Thank you, Ms. Acorn. Appreciate that. I'd like to call us back from our brief recess. We are now at agenda item 7.2, Parcel CH, future RCMP site, housing opportunity. Who would like to start us off on that discussion? Mr. Given.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Tomoda. As you'll see in your package, there is a recommendation that council refer Parcel CH site servicing to the 2023 capital budget discussion. So this is a recommendation from administration to refer this item forward so you can consider it in the context of the overall budget. So we're not asking for an approval to go and start digging here today, but really just to raise the issue with council so that you can consider whether you wish to forward it to budget and then consider it in the overall context. So in June of this year, council, as you know, you received and adopted the 2021 Jasper Community Housing Corporation governance review, which included an analysis of the housing gap in our community that identified a shortfall of approximately 686 units of housing in Jasper. Additionally, Parks Canada has previously granted permission to the RCMP to use Parcel CH, which is on the north end of town near the Forest Park Hotel, for a new RCMP detachment. I think council is likely aware of that because this was reflected in the 2018 PARIO plan for staff and seniors housing. There's a consideration that the current RCMP site could be future housing development opportunity. For a number of reasons, the development of the new RCMP detachment on the north end of town had stalled for the last number of years, particularly due to COVID and other matters. But in early 2022, Director Greathead and I met with members of the RCMP's project team on site and discussed opportunities to advance the development of the new detachment. When we were there, both administration and the RCMP saw an opportunity to advance housing by subdividing Parcel CH to create a new parcel at the rear. And this is reflected in the diagrams that are attached to the report. But to create a new parcel that would be appropriate for future residential development, the RCMP had considered if they were going to do independent development, potentially building some fourplexes on the site for their staff accommodation. But it does appear that that would be relatively low utilization of what could potentially be a very good site. So administration, using JCHC dollars, developed a bit of a draft concept for a collaborative approach that would provide an opportunity for a greater density of housing by creating that new parcel at the back. In the report, you'll see the independent RCMP site concept, which has two accesses out onto Connaught, and leaves that back half of the parcel relatively undeveloped. Again, they hadn't proceeded very far on the concept of their residential housing on that site. But you can see how little of the site is used. Below, you can see the site concept for a collaborative approach, which essentially creates a new joint servicing area highlighted in yellow there, which is essentially a new public roadway that goes along the north property line, split the north property line, sort of splitting down the middle. That would provide the opportunity for utilities to run through that new road. And that new road would provide public access to the back of the lot, which is large enough. Again, conceptually only. I don't want to get council or communities' hopes up, but in terms of size, the back lot could support a residential building of approximately 25 to 30 units. So it is not insignificant. The RCMP are required to bring services to their site in any case. They see the opportunity to partner with the municipality as doing community good and further advancing their project. And so they've indicated a willingness to pay their portion of that joint servicing, approximately 1/3 towards the project. The other 2/3 of any potential project would come essentially from local improvement levies. Administration estimates that the total cost of constructing that roadway, installing municipal utilities to the property line of the two new properties would be about $1.8 million. So if the RCMP were to pay their 1/3 up front, the balance would be municipal debenture, with the debenture payments covered by local improvement levies. Again, council administration is presenting this to start the discussion with you. We appreciate that you would need to see how this fits into the overall financial picture of the municipality. Administration would recommend that's best done at budget. We certainly didn't want to raise the issue with you and inquire if there's any additional information you might need at budget if you were interested in considering this. Deputy Mayor, I'll pause there and allow council to ask any questions that you might have both the concept.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think you were alluding to it and saying that, a lot of our debate could take place during budget time. And, I appreciate what we have here. Do any councillors have concerns? Go ahead. Mr. Councilman.
Not concerns, questions. So just trying to get my head around it. If we didn't go into this, RCMP would still construct 2/3 of that roadway.
Through Deputy Mayor Demoda, Councillor Olson, no, they would not. If there was no need for collaboration, the RCMP's sort of preference and the way that they'd originally been planning was just to have two direct accesses onto Connaught, have the services stubbed only to their site, which would present challenges for future servicing of any of the other sites around there. So I know that, and reasonably from their perspective, they're looking for the lowest cost opportunity, and if there was no need to participate or no desire for joint servicing, they would just service their site. They get their detachment up and running because they have a good budget to do that. They are interested in a collaborative approach and would be willing to contribute to a larger overall project if it comes.
How would they be servicing the duplexes or with the housing that's required?
Yeah, that's a significant challenge, and I think is a part of why they see a benefit in participating. Is if there is a desire to get a higher yield out of that back lot, and their contribution in servicing benefits the community in that by helping advance that, they see that as being worthwhile over what would be a high cost to them of running the services back to the back lot to serve a low number of units. Yeah. So it really is a collaborative approach of everybody saying, no, if we work together, we might be able to achieve more of the community rather than RCMP going it alone.
Okay. So, sorry, may I continue? So, yeah, there's a few questions that kind of relate. Who owns the property after the subdivision, the residential property after the subdivision?
That has not been decided, and that would be subject to, I think, future discussion between ultimately Parks Canada we are seeing in the municipality. We, administration, if council approved moving forward with something like this, administration would suggest the development of a memorandum of understanding, would spell out some of those finer level of details of, you know, what is going to be the disposition of the eventual lot. It may be an example similar to Parcel GC, which has received servicing, and where the local improvement levy payments that are, a portion of that property are being paid for by the federal government under PILT, or the payment in lieu of taxes. So strategically, I think administration would suggest that newly created parcel should stay in the hands of one of our two federal partners, RCMP or Parks Canada, until such time as the community is ready to develop it, so that those payments for the local improvement levy are covered by those federal partners for as long as possible.
Thank you. Good question. Councillor Mallon.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota. Just a question, if we do refer this to be part of the 2023 capital budget discussions, and if it does make it into the capital budget, doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to spend it in 2023. We could always defer it so as we not incur a higher debt level until absolutely necessary. In other words, we wouldn't necessarily be servicing the site until there was some expectation that the RCMP were ready to go on the ground.
Deputy Mayor Demota, for Councillor Melnick, the RCMP have a priority on building a new detachment. So my current understanding is that their desire and intention is to move forward with construction in 2023. So I think it's likely that that this joint servicing project would be undertaken in 23. That's certainly where administration would be recommending that it be reflected in council's budget. Council has an approved project, that you can be confident that administration doesn't borrow the money until we know what the project is, A, going forward, and B, that we try to delay borrowing as long as we can, frankly. Well, historically, I should say, we have tried to delay borrowing as long as we could, because in the past, interest rates were typically going down. I know that Ms. Melanchuk is sort of reconsidering that in a rising interest rate environment, but typically we don't incur debt until we have an actual need to do that. We don't do it speculatively. So if the project is going forward, then and it was approved in council's budget, then as we need the money, we would borrow money. And administration's understanding is the RCMP wish to proceed with their bill for 2023.
Thank you. Councillor Keller.
I know I'm jumping ahead, I'm just curious. For the residential building of 25 to 30 units, I presume this would go to Jasper Housing Corporation. But could you see this, that would be more affordable housing for Jasper, or a private contractor could come in and build some units? How do you see that?
For Councillor Keller, I think any of those opportunities would still be available. So the benefit of the joint servicing project would be that it would create a new lot that had existing access to municipal services. I think one of the challenges, as I understand it, the parks had in finding parties interested in parcel GB along Connaught Drive was that at the start of that discussion, that was an unserviced lot. So it really affected the price of the lot that parks could go to market for. So I think the ultimate development of any residential parcel would still be subject to significant discussion between Parks Canada, the Jasper Community Housing Corporation, and municipality about what the right approach is. But this would be in addition to our inventory of readily developable lots. The method of development would still be a discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon.
Thank you, Councillor Keller. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm trying to understand this. So it's a $1.8 million project. We would cover 2/3 of it through debt, and the payments would come from the local improvement levy. What exactly is that? And this wouldn't affect the tax pay. Like, this wouldn't affect taxes. I just want to fully understand this, but I don't.
Sure, absolutely. So last council, and recognizing it was last council, dealt with the local improvement levy on the G parcels along Connaught. The concept of a local improvement levy is where there is a infrastructure improvement and there are directly benefiting parcels of land, those, and I'll use the term landowners, sort of loosely in our Jasper context, but those landowners who directly benefit should carry the cost of that improvement. So the general tax base, somebody in, in Stone Mountain doesn't directly benefit from the addition of these services. Those three parcels, the potential RCD site, potential residential site, and the site to the north, are really the only parcels in Jasper that have a direct benefit of the addition of these services. And so local improvement levies are a way for the municipality to collect the cost of those services from those benefiting properties. If we have done it here in Jasper before, it's a commonly used tool all across Alberta, and really, yeah, does that help, Councillor Hall? Sorry, so the municipality would undertake the debt. There is a process to inform the landowners of the proposal. Landowner support is required, and if that support is achieved, the municipality passes a local improvement levy bylaw that says, here's how much money we're going to borrow, here's how long it will take to pay it off, and here's how much the cost will be to each of the benefiting properties. And so, and that cost, in this case, because it doesn't really benefit any of the rest of the municipality, that cost would be reflective of the debt payments. So the debt would be on the municipality's books, but the payments for the debt would be borne by the benefiting properties.
And who that would be, Parks Canada, the RCMP, or who would be the benefiting?
So those three parcels, so I'm not exactly sure whether the lot has been transferred from Parks Canada into given the RCMP lease yet. I don't know that answer. But let's, for the sake of argument, just say that right now they're all Parks Canada lots. And that they haven't given the lease to anybody. Certainly that's the case with the lot to the north. And I don't know what the status of the RCMP one, but in any case, yeah, let's say that's Parks Canada. Same as Parcel GC next to Petro Canada. There is an agreement from Parks Canada that they will transfer it to the municipality or the municipality lease or JCHC lease when we're ready to build on it. But until that time, it continues to be held by Parks Canada and they're making the payments on it.
So the only thing that's really affects within the municipality is our ability to borrow more money because we will get to the.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's where council would want to consider this in context of all the other budget discussions, sorry, all the other capital items and potential items that are coming through debt. And that's why administration recommended probably want to do this in context of the overall.
Okay, thank you. That makes more sense. I'm sure you guys all knew that, but I did not, so thank you. Okay.
No. Well, and you know what, I also had questions about that third parcel to the north, and I'll defer to the mayor in a second. For me, if we're borrowing a lump sum to cover all three, the servicing to that area, we're still going to be on the hook to some extent on that third parcel until it gets developed, in the sense that we have to pay interest on money that we borrow, and that has to come from somewhere.
Deputy Mayor Demota, so, and again, subject to actually going through the process. That parcel to the north is currently held by Parks Canada. I'm not aware of any lease or anybody else has interest in that. And so they, as the owner of that parcel, would be the ones who would be subject to local improvement levy payments, and local improvement levy payments would be the full cost of borrowing, including interest.
Okay, I might have, I'll wait till the mayor speaks and might have other questions unless he gets them answered. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor DeBoer. I'm in a position where I would be prepared to make a motion, but if there's others who have questions, I will wait. I think that it really does provide us an opportunity to better utilize that piece of land, and more housing is absolutely critical in town. So I am certainly supportive of the recommendation that we refer the matter to the 2023 capital budget discussions. However, at that time, when it assuming that it goes to capital budget discussions. I will be keenly interested to know whether that $1.8 million servicing cost includes potential off-site costs. So it seems to me if we add potentially 30 units behind the not yet built detachment, that adds sort of notionally another 500 cubic meters of wastewater monthly. I think by my calculations, does that mean we need to upgrade the lift station across the street, and who's going to pay for that? And it seems to me as well that if there is going to be this approach, there will have to be subdivision of the property, and that comes at a cost. And that's whose cost will that be? I mean, there are items that will impact all of this, and I would like to go into capital budget discussions with a better understanding of the costs. But I do think that it's an appropriate approach. And for a later date, I might also take a position on whether or not the local improvement levy ought to apply to the residential property. If we're looking at affordable housing, it will increase the cost, presumably. But I'm also of the view that additional housing in the community, although not a direct benefit, is certainly an indirect community benefit. And it may not always be inappropriate to say that it's a community cost, not just a cost to the property. But that's an argument for another day. I think the important thing is that we get this to a discussion at the appropriate time with the 2023 capital budget discussion, and subject to the fact that other councillors might have questions. I'm prepared now to make that mention.
Well, I do have just for clarification, if I may, Mr. Gibbon, I think maybe I just got my head wrapped around 3 different portions of this project as far as servicing goes. For more clarity, when it's described here as 1/3 burdens, the overall cost would be covered by 1/3 by the RCMP, 1/3 by payments under in lieu of taxes, and then the other third would be attributed to the new residential parcel. What specifically does that mean?
Sir, so, and apologies if it wasn't laid out well in the financial section, but essentially 1/3 the RCMP have indicated willingness to pay cash. So the municipality would not need to borrow for that 1/3. The other 2/3 would be covered by borrowing by the municipality, and that borrowing would be repaid through local improvement levy. So that is a different way, I think, than I described it. Sorry, a different approach to describing it than I had in the report, but meaning the same thing. So RCMP have money in their budget because they're going to need to service the parcel anyways. They have cash and they're willing to pay that cash, which would reduce the amount of borrowing that the municipality would need to take on. Any borrowing the municipality does need to take on would be paid for through local improvement levies on the other 2 parcels. Essentially, the RCMP can prepay their 1/3.
Yeah, the local improvement levy. And the other 2/3 gets covered by Parks Canada.
Is covered by the owners and again, the other 2,
Yeah.
they're leaseholders of the other 2 lots. And if Park Canada doesn't have leaseholders on those other 2 lots, then it will be something that will be subject to taxes.
Right, okay, just thank you for the clarification on it. Mr. Mayor, you'd like to make a motion?
If council is otherwise prepared, or committee, I should say, then I move that committee refer the parcel CH site servicing project to the 2023 capital budget discussions.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there any debate? Okay, call this to order. All in favor? Call the question. And forgive me. In other words, that's carried. Not opposed. Councillor Wexler, did I miss you?
No, I was appreciative of the clarification and the learning opportunity about the local improvement levy. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay. Appreciate that. Does anyone have anything else to add to 7.2 or move on to 7.3? All right, moving on to 7.3. Housing strategy resources. Mr. Gibb.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Demota. I previously referenced the housing gap that this council saw and received. And at that time, the committee made a motion directing the administration to identify the resources required to produce a strategy to address the housing gap and bring the recommendations to the committee prior to budget discussions. This is that report. The essence of the report is highlighting that currently our only resource dedicated to housing in the municipal organization is essentially a 0.3 full-time equivalent position. It's a very part-time position that generally acts in the administrative support capacity of the Jasper Community Housing Corporation. Any other effort on housing-related matters is led by myself as sort of the dual role of Chief Administrative Officer and CEO of Jasper Community Housing Corporation. Council has put a significant focus on housing in your strategic priorities in your plan. And the administration and the community are obviously well aware that housing availability and affordability are and will continue to be the largest issues facing Jasper. During the 2023 budget discussion, the administration is going to provide council an opportunity to establish a new community housing manager position. This would be a 1.0 dedicated position that would be focused on addressing the housing gap and advancing all housing related matters. It would include supporting the JCHC in its current form, working with myself to explore and potentially transition the JCHC to a municipally controlled corporation, managing the municipality's relationship with MPL Place, which is existing community housing, and there's some work there, as well as evaluating, improving, and delivering all the processes related to the provision of municipal staff accommodation, of which we have a number of units. And then finally, the position will be responsible for developing and implementing a plan to address the housing gap. So we're basically saying we need a body to be focused on housing related issues. We're going to propose that full-time position to you in budget and provide council an opportunity to decide if that's in alignment with your priorities, if you wish to dedicate resources to that, reflecting, in recognition of the overall sort of budget context. The position that council will see will be the incremental cost, because there is already a 0.3 being paid, would be approximately 68,000 in 2023. And then 5,000 per year in future years. That's reflective, and just so the council and community aware, that is the salary plus benefits of essentially establishing that new position. And that new position would lead the development of the strategy to address the housing gap. So the administration is recommending that the committee receive this report for information, that you will see that position have budget. You don't need to refer it there, but you will see it, and you will have an opportunity to fund it if you choose to.
Thank you, Mr. Gibb. Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, just missed that point where you suggested that there is 0.3 already. Would it just be an additional 0.7 to become a full-time position?
Yeah, that's through Deputy Mayor Demota for Councillor Olson. Yes, Councillor Olson, that's correct. That's why the incremental cost in 2023 is only 68,000, because we're sort of building on that 0.3 position. The full cost of that position, including benefits in future years, would be approximately 95,000. Again, recognizing there's a salary grid and whatever sort of candidate we go with fit something.
It's good. I'm glad you asked that, because I was thinking 0.3 1/3, and that was just kind of represented differently there. It's not 0.3 of the position, because that would be, yeah, I guess it would be. All right. Any other questions, comments, observations? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, if there aren't any other questions at this time, I could just speak from my JCHC role. I feel that this position is would be very helpful in moving forward progress with JCHC in general. But again, working with us to change our governance model or build our governance model, as well as kind of move any priorities forward. It's just capacity is not there at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Wax.
I just wanted to say that I'm really happy to see this. I think housing is a critical issue in our community, and I think it's very difficult to expect the current administration to try to achieve significant goals, working off the side of their desk to do that. I think having a dedicated role is critical.
Great. Thank you for that. Any other questions? We have a recommendation here. Does anyone want to address that? Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, I would make the recommendation that committee receive this information or report for information, as well as direct that committee direct administration to identify resources required to produce a strategy to address the 2021 gap and return to committee prior to the 2023 budget discussion.
All right. This year.
Sorry if there's any confusion. This report doesn't contain alternatives as some of the other reports are sort of structured. So that's a reflection of the motion that council previously made that led to this report. So administration's advice would be that the position would be the first step in resources required to address the gap. Any other steps would come in future budget years. So that second portion, I don't think is really required because council already giving us that direction. It really is just to acknowledge that we presented, that we followed up on that motion. It was here, and that you will see the rest of it in the budget.
Thank you for that. Does that change your motion?
So my motion would be to committee receive this information or report for information.
All right. Any debate? Questions for clarity? Everyone understand? All in favor? That's carried. Right. If we have no other discussion on 7.3, that brings us to 7.4, environmental responsibility resources. Our
Deputy Mayor Demota, I'll just provide a brief introduction and say that this report is somewhat similar to the last, where council has asked for some information about resources required to support, some work. Administration's done a bit of a look at that and really is telling you that we have considered that, and you will see it in the budget. So the motion that we're requesting is the same to receive this report for information. Director Greathead and Director Reed can cover the details further out in the decision.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience in getting through the top portion leading up to this, Mr. Greathead. If you'd like, go ahead.
Good morning, Deputy Mayor and Council. On the August 23rd Committee of the Whole meeting, Council received an update from the community conversations, which highlighted a number of the environmental concerns and themes that were identified by the community. And Council passed the motion to direct administration to explore the capacity and undertake the work identified by the environmental responsibility community conversation, and that if there is insufficient capital, to explore expanding capacity prior to budget 2023. Administration has reviewed the opportunities identified and categorized them into three general categories: those which are routine in nature and require little additional resources, those that can be incorporated into future work plans with existing resources, and finally ones which are more significant and complex that would require additional administrative resources for research, program development, implementation, ongoing coordination, and promotion. Attachment A shows administration's full assessment of these topics. Another observation is that the opportunities likely involved in a number of different departments and dedicated focus will be likely required to lead cross-departmental collaboration and ensure meaningful progress. During the 2023 budget presentations, administration will provide council with an option to evolve the municipal energy manager into the municipal energy and environment manager to act as lead on all environmental matters. And for financial administration, will present full details during the council presentation or during the budget presentations for 2023. And the appropriate or approximate, incremental cost position would be about $70,000 in 2023, and then increase to $109,000 per year of future years. And that increase speaks to the fact that part of the year's position is covered by the grant funding opportunity through the Municipal Climate Action Center.
Thank you, Mr. Grayhead. Mr. Gibbon, you said that, no, that's fine. I think that's good information that we have here. I'm looking at all these positions. I'm like, where are we gonna house everybody? Unless we get them those locally and then got more jobs to fill in the community. Does anybody have questions? The councillors? Councillor Wax.
Not so much a question, but a compliment. I found this request for decision very well written, very easy to follow, and packed full of information. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
I agree. Detailed and concise is a beauty. I don't know what happened with my microphone. I think the mayor might have cut me off. Guess not. It's just not working. I will project my voice. Thank you for that observation, Councillor Waxer. Mr. Grayhead, it looked like you wanted to comment.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I did not prepare this, just so you know, and this is Mr. Gibbon as to work. I don't want to take any credit for that.
You should when you can. I do it all the time. All right, thank you, Director Reed, for bailing me out there. Mayor Arlen.
And thank you, Deputy Mayor. It is an interesting report and lots of detail. I am confused by an acronym on the attachment. What is AS? So it's third from the bottom, create a social media channel. And then in that current capacity, there is, would need to be coming from operations bracket per AS.
Your worship, that's initials of an employee.
Oh, okay. All right, I was expecting a document or something. I couldn't understand what I was reading. Thank you.
Assume standards. Councillor Malik, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota. Just for clarity for myself, the municipal energy manager was a shared position with Hinton, and it was covered by a grant. Is the town of Hinton going to continue with their energy manager position, or they're probably on the understanding that this is the direction that we're going in our community?
Deputy Mayor DeMota for Councillor Melnick. So since this report was written, we've received additional information from the Municipal Climate Change Action Center that there may be the potential to extend for a second year. when we started this, it didn't look like that was going to be an opportunity. And so administration is going to be meeting with the Hinton administration and the energy manager, talk about what 2023 would look like. At this stage, we want to be prepared, recognizing the environmental focus in council strategic plan and all of these items that are coming up in community conversations. We wanted to reflect if the municipality needed to go it alone. That's what's really reflected in the financial section of the report here. You know, if there's no grant funding in 2020, beyond the end of the program, midway through 2023, what would that look like? And if Hinton wasn't interested in here, the administration is going to have some of those conversations, and we may have a revision to those numbers when we see the budget. But really, the question here is, this report is saying we will reflect a position focused on environment matters at budget. We're going to do some more work. As I said, there was information that came just late last week after the report was published that the MCCAC is going to be accepting applications for second year funding. So Hinton and Jasper will discuss with that, and we'll be able to report back on the budget.
Thank you for that clarity. Appreciate it.
All right. Are there any more questions or comments to add? May I have a motion to receive this report for information? Councillor, are you offering a motion, Councillor Waxer?
I was, that I would make the motion that committee receive this report for information.
Okay, thank you. Carol calls question. All in favor? Not opposed? Was your hand up, Councilor Wilson? Yeah, okay, that's carried. Any further comments on 7.4? Thank you very much for the report. 7.5, Community and Economic Development Fund. Straight to Director Reed, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demoda. And here, nope.
Sit down.
Can you hear me now? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demoda, and through the council. So the item before you is indeed the Community Economic Development Fund, Policy B17, and the recommendation is that committee recommend council adopt the updates to Policy B017, Community and Economic Development Fund. Our alternatives are that committee direct administration make any changes that you should perhaps come up with today, and also that committee refer additional funds for the Community Economic Development Fund to the 2023 budget discussion if you are interested in increasing the funding. So you will remember, I'm sure, that back on July 20th, 2021, Council approved the Policy Development and Review Policy, and it establishes that the municipality will operate a standardized system of developing, recording, approving, distributing, and reviewing policies. And hence we are here because on May 24th, 2022, committee directed administration to conduct a review of the administrative procedures for Policy B17, Community and Economic Development Fund, and present recommendations at a future committee meeting. Committee also referred the matter of funding the Community Economic Development Fund to the 2023 budget discussion. So under discussion, administration has reviewed the policy and administrative procedures for Policy B17, Community and Economic Development Fund, and has developed a draft updated policy for council review. The draft updated policy includes key information on what the Community Economic Development Fund does, the scope of the fund, the standards, the responsibilities of council administration, as well as key definitions to ensure that the policy can be understood. The standards section of the policy sets out the high-level parameters under which all requests for funding must adhere. The level of funding council wishes to allocate to this fund can be determined by council and detailed in the standards section. So strategic relevance, promote and enhance recreational cultural opportunities and spaces, enable and facilitate events that provide opportunities to increase community connections, embrace our growing diversity, leverage and create opportunities for greater inclusion, communicate and engage with residents, and welcome the expertise, innovation, creativity, and commitment of community members, groups, and associations. the relevant legislation that we have listed there. And under financial, the 10,000 referenced in the policy can be funded within the existing budget. Any greater amount should be referred to budget discussions. During the 2023 budget presentation, administration will present council with an option to add a position focused on fund development. And that position would also help administer and support projects that the municipality chooses to fund via the Community and Economic Development Fund. I should make it clear that that is considering the idea or the concept of increasing the budget for this particular program. As we mentioned, at $10,000, this is currently in budget and currently could be accommodated with our capacity. And so the policy, this is one of our more robust policies due to its nature and wanting to bring the clarity right to any possible applicants right off the bat. And so without reading every word in the policy, I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Director Reed. Council? Your worship, and then Councillor Waxer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor DeMora. I thank Director Reed for this, but I do have a number of questions. Firstly, the focus on inclusivity is generally appropriate, but the way that it is worded would, I think, prevent some groups from applying at all, because the wording is that it must demonstrate that there aren't barriers. I think the word remove should be changed, because maybe there are no barriers yet and they don't plan any. But I was wondering, suppose a nonprofit came forward that wanted to reinstitute something like the White Bike program. That's designed to allow people to share bicycles. But of course, it's exclusive to those who can ride a bicycle. And yet, this policy says if you can't demonstrate that none are excluded, then we probably won't support you. Which, you know, I don't think that's the intent, but that's how I read it. So I wonder whether it needs some additional consideration. Under the standards, there is an indication that to be eligible, a group would have to be governed by a democratically elected board of directors. I'm not sure what we mean by that, but often a small startup nonprofit is a couple of people with a big idea, and they form a society and they are the only members, and so they are the directors. You can't say that's a democratically elected board of directors, but that's how things get started. And so I wouldn't want to see such people eliminated based on the wording of the policy. And then for those who are ineligible, there is a requirement that they can't have a political affiliation. I'm not quite sure what we might mean by that, or which participate in political activities. And I think of something, for example, like Out Jasper. They might occasionally engage in political activities, but they might also come forward for assistance with a rainbow crosswalk, which some would argue is a political activity. Would they be excluded? So I appreciate that the intent is to offer help, but there is meaning in all the words we choose, and I find some difficulty in some of the words.
Your worship, I'll just jump in, I'll literally give the mic back to Director in a second. But you know, this is exactly why the policy is here. The policy is intended to be council's policy, and so you can change any of those words that you wish. And so if the administration is happy to take feedback, this is one of those situations where there might be a number, I mean, even the fundamental idea of the sort of purpose is to increase jobs or business. Is that council's desired purpose? It may or may not be. And so administration has drafted this for your consideration. I think we acknowledge that if you have some changes that you wish to make, that's why it's here in front of you. It would be helpful as we go through, if council could identify changes that you want to make. And this is always a challenge when there may be a whole bunch to try to get them in a form of motion, but maybe it's motion by motion, or maybe it's starting to have this round of discussion on council members about, does this meet what we're trying to do? Do we have any issues with things we see here and what needs to be changed? But it is, this is administration's sort of straw dog start to give council something to discuss and to deliberate on. We're open to any changes that you want to direct us to make.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, and I am maybe guilty of thinking and living in the past, because community development fund in particular in past iterations was more focused on community development as opposed to strictly economic development, and hence my concern for groups are more engaged in that rather than purely economic development. But maybe if that is the policy, the community is a word that should come out and we deal with an economic development. I appreciate those comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Waxer.
I really like a lot with this policy. I think it's, I really appreciate the fact that it comes back to committee of the whole and then requires a motion of council, because I know in its previous iteration, I believe it was different, or decisions were made by boards appointed by council. So I think it's wonderful that it's coming back to council in particular. The only question I had was the funding requests to a maximum of $2,500. I wondered, since it does come back to council and there is a budget allocation, if that should just be left to council to make that decision, if there is at some point a very urgent need in the community, if we might want to send the entire 10,000 at one time for something that was critical. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer. Other councillors? Is this something that can come back to the legislative committee to work on wording if you wish, your worship, or could this be contemplated a little further at another committee level?
Deputy Mayor Demota, if you wish, I'll just speak to process. Certainly, council does have the authority to refer any matter it wishes to the legislative committee. Legislative committee meeting next week is focused on procedure bylaw, and that's been where the bulk of the work has been. This might be the type of issue where all council members may have some different opinions and different ideas. Totally appropriate to do it here. If everybody needs some time to consider it, you might want to make a motion to refer this to a future committee of the whole meeting. And you could specify, in 2 weeks, in a month, or whatever, so that everybody could have a little bit of time to take this away, think about it, think about changes that they might like to propose at that future committee meeting, or you can make changes here today. So really, you have at least 3 different alternatives. Set it aside, think about it for a little bit, come back and discuss it at committee of the whole, and make decisions, make amendments, changes, make amendments or changes today at committee of the whole, or refer it to the legislative committee to make changes and then bring it back to committee level. Completely up to council's approach that.
Yeah. Precisely my sentiment. Worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota. And if it was up to me, perhaps now it is, but then it's up to council. My preference is the first of the alternatives that committee direct administration to make changes to the draft policy and return to a future committee of the whole meeting. And I say that with some hesitation, as was said by administration. This is council's policy and we can choose any words we want, but wordsmithing at this level is, I find, very time consuming and unproductive. With the comments that were made today, I wonder whether the more efficient course is to ask administration to give it some consideration. I would add that a definition of community capacity might be beneficial. It's not in there now, and yet that is the goal, is to build community capacity. So if they have a better understanding of the goal, then maybe the words would be, we would understand whether they're aligned to that. In any event, all that said, my motion is that we direct it back to administration to make changes and return to a future committee of the whole meeting. And I will not speculate on when that future date might be. I do recognize that there are all sorts of capacity issues. Even though this is a matter for budget, I can't imagine it being resolved either by council or by administration before budget. But I would leave it entirely wide open.
Go ahead.
Deputy Mayor, so I'm not going to be the one that's going to be doing work on this, so I'm going to speak up on behalf of my team. It would be helpful if council identified the types of changes that they'd be interested in, even in terms of broad categories, if you said, to improve wording, to remove economic elements, to enhance economic elements, whatever it is. I think we need a bit more direction on the types of changes that committee or individual members of the committee are interested in, because at this stage we've made a presentation. There hasn't been a significant amount of direction on what types of changes you might like to see. And so I'm not sure that you would get a work product that would be substantially different unless you tell us what things you'd like to see as being different. Unless Director Reed had received a good sense of the types of changes council looking for.
Thank you, Chair, given through Deputy Mayor DeMona to council. I do have a few notes, certainly that the clarity around inclusion and that it may be a barrier, which is, I'm not exactly sure of the definition of irony, but there is certainly a message there for us, and we can look to make this policy more inclusive. The society requirements, so democracy comes from the society requirements, and so perhaps that's a barrier as well. So we can look into that. I have a message, a note about the 2,500 max would be perhaps better done as a council discretion. So that's certainly easy to accommodate. And I have a couple of definitions to improve or include, which is one, community capacity, and another is political. I think that it would serve us all well to understand what we meant by that.
Putting up my own hands, which is what he's doing. I'm looking over at you. Yeah, and then I think we're not. I think the intent is not to wordsmith here, but you know, I would be okay coming back and circling the things that I would want to consider. Like one of them off the top, like under applicants, you know, some of the things that you spoke about, like. And I'm sorry if this has already been said, but funding will only be granted to organizations. Could that word granted be changed to considered, for example? Just because you qualify doesn't mean you're gonna get the funding, right? So I know that that's getting into semantics, but as the mayor said before, words matter. And I'm not, yeah, so I don't know if we want to get into that process, but those are like, I haven't, you know, strongly considered all of the wording here. Maybe we could go back, but if you're comfortable coming back with something with different detail, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor DeMona, and I appreciate the comments by Mr. Reid and how he's interpreting our discussions. I would like to see taken out of this particular proposal that there is a reference that there's potentially an option to add a position focused on fund development. In the 23 budget, I don't know for $10,000 whether, we'll need to add a position. I think that can just be done someplace other community development within Mr. Reid's role. Certainly, I think it's more important that we get some clarity as to the purpose of this particular fund, because right now it seems like we've really boxed in what this fund can be used for, and with such parameters that I don't know how many groups would actually be able to access the funding. So I think, we might want to have another look at, what is the purpose of this fund? It just seems like it's so restrictive in so many ways that it won't be used.
All right, I have Councillor Keller and Councillor Holland. I know it's our obligation to do what's right for the community, to make sure that we are diligent in our work, and I might suggest, for the benefit of expediency, the time restraints that we have today, we can go on for another hour in this realm, or if council wants to consider taking this home, circling the things that you'd like to see changed, and or make recommendations to administration can come back with something, the things that they've heard today. We can direct them to completely do that, and then at the next committee of the whole, maybe come up with something a little bit more time efficient. And because several councils have already said to me, we have a long agenda today, and I'm hoping that you can make things a little bit more efficient for us while we're here, considering that we do have an organization meeting too. So I'm just bringing that, and I know everybody wants to add, but the same people are adding stuff that want me to keep this as efficient as possible, and it puts me in a little bit of a catch-22. Councillor Keller MP.
I just want to say I like the outline of this. Back in the day, we had two funds. We had the Community Development Fund that we had a separate committee that administrated from the public, and then we had the Economic Development Fund that came to council for us to approve. I think that we need to open it up a little bit more. I know on that Community Development Fund, there, like, say, somebody at the high school that wanted to go take a coaching course that would further the community by working voluntary and soccer, whether it's gymnastics. We allowed some of that stuff under the Community Development Fund, and I don't think the way it's written today that because if it's just nonprofit, we'd be able to do that. So, and I don't know if 10,000, I think one was 5 and one was 10 in the past. Maybe we need to increase it a little bit. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Councillor Keller MP. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Does this fund get used up in entirety every year?
For Councillor Hall, this fund doesn't currently exist and hasn't had funds dedicated to it. So it has not been accepting applications. And that was, so maybe just the genesis of this report was of our policy review process. Administration made a recommendation of policies that could be deleted. We suggested that the whichever policy was, I'm sure it's in the report, B17 could be deleted. At that time, council said, well, hold on a second. Maybe what we need to do is relook at this rather than just deleting it and not doing it. Maybe we need to reestablish this because there hadn't been funds dedicated to it over the last number of years. So the answer is it doesn't get used because nobody's applying for it because it kind of had been on hold.
Yeah, I think the confusion for me was that there is this money in the budget, which is what you said, so it's just been sitting there.
The money in the budget is in a line item under council's budget for special projects or for projects. So so that's where we said in the report, if council wanted to fund this at just a $10,000 level, there is money there in the existing budget that could be directed to this purpose. If council said, well, actually, we need more than $10,000 a year to do this, then administration would come to a budget time with a recommendation for additional dedicated money.
Yeah, just for a little bit of history, there were different variations of this. We had a community economic development fund, we had a community development fund. And then we used to have staged applications where we only receive them in March and in September of every year. That got too cumbersome, so we merged it into one, which looks similar to something like this. One was 10, one was 5, then we merged it to 15. We stopped getting applications for it just because it was too hard and or there wasn't a lot of interest. Then we scaled it down and we scaled it down, and then nobody was applying because it just wasn't there. And so here we are again to start it up again. See if it comes to some of these. All right, do you recall the similar? All right. Does anybody have any direction they want to give? Councillor Keller.
I'll make a motion that we defer this Canadian Economic Development Fund to a future committee of the whole, and that administration brings back a revised version with the information that they heard today, and any other councillor that wishes to give input, email CAO Gibbon or Deputy or Director Reed their information, and the administration has time to address it, and they'll tell them when bring it back to.
Okay. So we have a motion with some intent behind it. Is that, Director Reed, you had your hand up. Did you want to get clarification on that? Okay. So the brief part of it is that we defer this to a future committee of the whole meeting and have administration come back with amendments that they heard for discussion today. Period. And then if any other council wanted to contribute and add or take into consideration, they can hear that and maybe put that into what's been considered. Okay. We'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We just want to make sure you had your hand up. There we go. All right. It's now 12:15. Does anybody need a break? Okay. We're going to 7.6, the continuation of municipal services. Mr. Gannon?
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Demota. Director Greathead is here with a report identifying a number of areas where the municipality, for a variety of historical reasons, because we're providing services to other entities within the community. This came forward because there was a administration made a service level change last year because we couldn't find any evidence that the council directed a level of service, essentially removing snow adjacent to one church property. Director Greathead and his team have sort of reviewed the issue and found that there's actually a number of cases where the municipality is providing service to other organizations, and there is a lack of documentation that demonstrates why we're providing that service. And so Director Greathead has a report covering all those areas. He can identify that. And really, administration's recommendation is that the municipality charge for the services that it's providing, and the rates would essentially be as are discussed in the report. We also have for council's consideration, so just to be clear, that is administration's first recommendation in terms of fiscal equity, that we charge people for the services that they receive. There is the alternative that is identified in the report to continue to provide the services at no charge, but that we should be doing that in accordance with policy F-104. So administration is open to either. I think our first default position is if we're providing a resource that directed, the service that directly benefits one organization, there should be a cost to that organization unless council tells us otherwise. And that's really the foundation of Director Greathead's report. I'll turn it over to Director Greathead to briefly cover the organizations that we're providing services to, the the types of services that we're providing and administration's estimated cost of those services.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Starting with the background, to ensure that we're compliant with policy F-104, our relationship with external groups, council needs to approve the following services that have been historically provided by the municipality, which include at Jasper Tourism, we do winter sidewalk maintenance with an estimated value of $1,000 a year. The United Church winter sidewalk maintenance, we estimate that at about $2,500 per year. The Anglican Church winter sidewalk maintenance is estimated at $3,500 per year. Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce, the winter sidewalk maintenance is estimated at a value of $1,000 per year. The Chamber of Commerce, we do summer grounds maintenance, flowers, and the maintenance of flowers for their building, and that's at $8,500 per year. And Canada Post, we pick up the mixed paper on site for them, and that's an estimated value of $1,500 per year. As Mr. Given had stated, we have a lot of anecdotal understandings of how we got here, but nothing that I can refer to and say that this is a service that we're obliged to continue with, and nor anything to say not. We understand that the sidewalk maintenance at the church began as Greenview Parks Canada in compensation for the construction of the lower parking lot on their site. And in return for giving up that land, Parks had agreed to provide the winter maintenance around their lot. We've not been able to confirm this agreement one way or the other. It's just an understanding, and some of this is again going back to service creep, where we try and make sure that we're providing the services that are approved by council, and not providing benefit for one party over there. So that with the there was a bit of a concern as well raised from residents of the Pine Manor traversing sidewalks along the stretch of road, and that there was inconsistent maintenance between Pine Manor, the Anglican Church, and the United Church. And so administration made the call many years ago just to keep the brooms down and apply salt on those areas. And so that's how we got to where we are with these services and the provision of the services. And so just to be compliant with 104, that's why this is in front of you.
Well, this is good information to have. And a good example of maybe service creep or other obligations that we've kind of committed ourselves to and continue on. I appreciate the work that's gone behind this to get us the information and the estimated value of those services. Now it's a question for us whether we want to continue. Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
I'm just reviewing this, noticing that it's not just sidewalk maintenance. There's some, say Canada Post mixed paper. Why would administration have left out commercial cardboard out of this as well? Like if we're talking about service creep and services for businesses that they're should or shouldn't be paying for the service.
Deputy Mayor Devona, if I can speak to Councillor Wilson's question. Right now, our understanding is that they, part of the rationale for picking up the cardboard and the tax differential of the 5 to 1 that the commercial businesses are paying in town, that may be a portion of that cost, is my understanding of how we got there. Recently, there's been some massive changes to the recycling market, and they are very, very new and very emerging. And then Mr. Given and I were just in discussions yesterday, and we will be providing some information to council, and I think there will be some additional complaints about at that time regarding some of our commercial cardboard services going forward.
I think in addition to what Director Great had shared there's also a matter of who gets a utility bill. And so those customers that are getting that commercial pickup do receive utility bills, and on their utility bill, they would be paying a recycling charge. And so I guess our current standard of service is, you know, our current standard of service, for better or worse, is that we are doing that pickup in some areas. I think there could be more work there, but that would be reflected more in utility billing. I think the administration's first would be administration's first sense on that. That's probably a discussion there for the level of service that people receive for their recycling charge on the utility bills. My understanding is, and so Canada Post in the pickup of the mixed paper, my understanding is that Canada Post does not pay a recycling charge on the utilities. I don't know that for a fact. I believe that's the case, and that's why this one's identified. It's because they're not in the same sort of situation of other commercial properties receiving a utility bill that they're at least nominally paying for recycling charges. That's why the scope is sort of limited here to where we're doing services that were out of the ordinary, and that we couldn't find any sort of historic precedent for or for documentation.
Yeah, I think specifically to that, to the Canada Post pickup, that was something that was, I think, orchestrated by our past environmental stewardship coordinator in response to community concern about Canada Post just throwing that into general waste. So, but then again, you know, that's just anecdotal evidence, and here we are. So I don't know where that $1,500 was covered before, if that was just something donated. But I'm grateful that we're here and we need to document this and more things that, you know, become visible to us. Councillor Keller.
I just want to address Just Park Chamber Commerce Summer Ground Maintenance and Flowers, the 8,500 per year. That went back to when Community Bloom started, because I was the manager of the chamber then, and we had taken over the Robson House, and the Robson House is actually, once the chamber ceased to exist, would become the municipalities. And so municipality stepped in and took care of the front of the house, especially for Community in Blooms. They built the boxes, they put in the flowers every year. That was never at a request from the chamber. It was kind of identified that as we were starting Community in Blooms, the Robson House was a historic site, and that a lot of visitation would go there. We had delegations from Heconi, because that's where Heconi started, was with the Chamber of Commerce. So in fairness to the chamber, it just happened. And I just want to put that little bit of history in there.
That's good. And we might need an agreement if we're going to continue. That's good. All right, we've got Councillor Wilson or the mayor, and then Councillor Waxer. Just want to acknowledge that I'll be considering it. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on Councillor Calagrante's point, but I think that the Jasper Chamber of Commerce can be differentiated, because my recollection is that we are in fact the leaseholder, that it's like a landlord-tenant relationship. That's our leasehold. They own the house. We might get it if the chamber was ever to collapse, as Councillor Calagrante said, but it is, I think, different in that respect, that it's one of the leases that belongs to the municipality. My question for Mr. Greathead, and perhaps it's self-evident, but you've given estimated values, but is it fair to say that that is the estimated cost to the municipality, not the value to the person?
Yes, Your Worship, that's correct. That would be the estimated level of our effort that we expend, not what its retail value would be.
Right. And with respect to the alternatives, you have included in one alternative the museum, which otherwise doesn't appear. So is that just to allow an opportunity for equity? So if we were going to take the alternative, say with respect to the churches, Tourism Jasper, Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce, and Canada Post, then the equitable thing would be to include the museum as well.
That's correct, Your Worship. That was raised by Director Reed, saying that might be an oversight on our part, as we do provide them the property and some financial support throughout the year. So instead of if we're got support in the level of effort to maintain that sidewalk out in front. He felt that that should be included in there in this discussion at this point.
Okay, but we never have provided that level of service
No,
to
we
that entity. And the other ones, they're shrouded in the midst of time. We don't know how we got into that, but there we are.
Yes, worship.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, Councillor Wilson.
Well, just speaking further to the alternatives, I would be very cautious in charging for the service that would put us in direct competition with snow clearing companies. And if we're talking about equity, no, not equity, equity, there's still three similar words there. That many churches are left out on this list, so that creep, I'm sure could be, could occur, and who are we to then say, no, we're only going to charge these entities, not the Catholic Church or the Baptist Church or whomever. So I would, yeah, definitely caution ourselves from committing to offering a service that could be supplied by by commercial business.
Does anybody else have anything to add? Mr. Reader, do you think that maybe we can ask Parks Canada if they haven't forwarded any agreement or physical agreement between the Anglican Church and, or have you?
Deputy Mayor, I have reached out to Parks Canada, and again, I haven't been able to receive any confirmation on the agreement.
Okay. That's the best we have for now. Yeah, it's definitely concerning. Councilor Mellon.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota. I do recall receiving a letter from, was it Reverend Prose? That that's how that agreement regarding the sidewalk. So there's some other anecdotal or knowledge there. So it, you know, would bring to light here with the Jasper tourism location and the building ownership does put us in a situation where that pretty well means it's our building to maintain. At least historically it has been.
Tourism Jasper
Chamber, sorry. And you know, again, I'm a little confused with the Jasper Museum. Currently, we're not doing a sidewalk. Okay, so that's why it wasn't included in the lower part of it. They are currently maintaining their own.
Councillor Caroline.
Also, the Anglican Church house where the Jasper Food Bank is and where our food recovery. So we have a lot of Jasper residents going in that area. Also, to me, it's a matter of safety with regarding Pine Grove and all our seniors working in that area. I just worry, I know a lot of these churches don't have a lot of money, so that if we were to hold this service, will it not get done? And then, you know, they give these areas free for some of the programs we need to run. So I think it's something we really have to consider.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Also, you know, to Councillor Wilson's point, Councillor Waxer, I see that, you know, we're considering some and leaving out others. That's definitely a bigger conversation. Councillor Waxer.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that I echo Councillor Kelleher MP's concerns about the Anglican Church housing the food bank and that and the food recovery program, and that is a valuable service to the community. And so I'm anxious about upsetting that balance.
Okay, well, it's an opportune time for it to be discussed, considering we're moving into budget and, you know, council wants to consider the 19,000 plus in cost, our cost. Then we can do that. There was some conversation going here. Does anyone else have anything to add or ask from administration? Councilor Wilson?
Unfortunately, this is upon us at, first snowfall is pretty imminent. So I would suggest that this year we continue the services that we have been offering. However, through whatever circumstance, but we do have further conversation about do we offer these services in the future, but we can't cancel it immediately now and leave everybody in a lurch looking for private snow clearing companies to step up. But again, it's a larger conversation that suggests that, well, I know in other communities, and this is when it comes from a friend out east, but the municipality clears all sidewalks in the community. And of course, that would add to operations, it would add to another or more employees, etc. But that's a conversation we could have, and it could be stemmed from this. So I would make a motion that we continue the services that we have been offering, because the timeline is not appropriate to cancel at this point. And the administration returned back to, let's leave it at that for now, that we continue to offer the services for the 2022-23 year and continue the conversation with more time to discuss.
Okay, that's a motion. Or just something for consideration. Okay. Your worship.
I will speak in favor of the motion, but I wonder whether instead of a one-year term, we maintain those services and enter into signed agreements for a 3-year term. Think about it.
Yeah. I decline the friendly amendment, although because I think that we should be able to deal with this topic during our term.
Well, in fairness, we've had a year. I mean, this came up almost a year ago, when the churches were advised that there would be a change, and it's taken this long. We are where we are. The facts may change. And so, do we provide it? I mean, I think you're right that it's fair right now. We're on the cusp of the first snowfall to deal with it, and I'm in agreement that we continue. But I would be in agreement to continue for a longer period of time, because I think nothing will change, and we'll be right back in this spot sometime in the next year, whenever we choose to go back at the federal government.
Thank you for that. And just for clarification, I'm glad that you said for 22-23, and I think you wanted to say winter season, because if we decide that we don't want to continue in 2023 in our budget, that means like January 1st in the middle of winter, we wouldn't go forward. So there is some budgetary concern here and something to contemplate there. I'm all in favor personally of moving towards getting some official agreements. But then, we're opening the door for more asks, I think, as well, because of equity concerns in the community. And, and just for a point of clarification, when you were referring to somebody from back out east, would that be like in the Eford area of Ontario, or you don't have to say that?
I'm not sure, but from a long-term resident of Jasper.
Yes.
But it's his hometown.
All right. Well, that could be a budget conversation as well about sidewalk sweeping for the entire community. So you do have a motion
Again, sorry, my motion does not include Maryland's friendly amendment. I think it's not something we want to continue. It's just, it's in front of us at a not a great time. And I think that we owe it to people that or the groups that we have been providing the service to provide that service. And let's have a conversation throughout the next year, not November. Or because it's not yet November.
May I make a friendly amendment or suggest a friendly amendment? That's committee defer the conversation on this to budget, to the 2023 budget. Maybe not.
Deputy Mayor Demota, just so administration has identified what the sort of estimated cost of providing these services. To be clear, that cost is already reflected in our current budget. Really, it just means that all other taxpayers are, paying for the staff that do this work. And so there is no direct budget implication. I mean, we wouldn't need less staff. We would just be able to do other things with these staff if we aren't doing these tasks. If we continue to do these tasks this winter season, we'll continue to do them as we did last winter season with no impact to budget. So that number there is reflective of the administration's estimate of the cost. I think council could think about it as that is the subsidy that all other taxpayers are providing to these properties. And council is basically in a position of saying there's reason to do so or not. That's, but there's not a direct financial impact on the 2023 budget because the council told us today to not do any of these things. We would just stop doing them and inform the parties, obviously, and keep our current staff doing other things.
Would you be able to clarify your motion for us? Jean? Okay. So I thought.
Yeah, I could clarify it and probably add a little extra to it, so the conversation doesn't go up until next year at this time. I would make a motion that administration continue the work described as within the request for decision for the 2022-2023 year. The administration will also return to a future committee of the whole report on snow clearing options for the community as a whole.
I was able to write that down quickly enough. Just want to make sure that the administration understands. I think council understands.
Maybe just to assist our recording secretary, I'll confirm how I think I heard that, Councillor Olson. Committee direct administration continue winter sidewalk maintenance services at the United Church, Anglican Church, Jasper Tourism Office, and Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce for the 2022-2023 winter season. And that this be reviewed in 2023. And then there's this additional idea that you also had, and direct administration bring forward a report on municipal service to clean all sidewalks in the community.
That's correct. And we could split the motion up as well.
Because one is telling us what to do with these properties.
Yes.
The other one is saying, oh, hey, this is a good issue. Maybe we should look at this other thing. And so you may get some council members that want to vote for one part of that and not the other part. So I'm not sure if they're the same motion, but two pretty distinct things.
Yeah. No, and the real desire there was just so this conversation carries on and we keep talking about that. So I would make a motion that Mr. Given had just suggested. So we continue the services at no charge for the 2022-2023 season. That's just to clarify the snow clearing. I don't think yet, as well as the mixed paper, that's year round as well. But other than, we can discuss the grounds maintenance for the day. Future day.
Okay. Your worship.
Thank you. 2 points for clarity. I interpreted the motion initially as support for the third of the alternatives. And there are 2 aspects that I think are missing right now. Firstly, this has come to us on the basis that administration thought council needed to make a decision. And so rather than committee direct, I thought it should be that committee recommend council and then council will make the determination. And secondly, the question of signed agreements so that we are in compliance with our own policy. And I think that just got overlooked. I don't think it was intentional, but should we be directing ourselves to ensure that there are signed agreements for this, so we regularize something that, I mean, one of the difficulties here is that there are no agreements, and so we don't know what our responsibilities are or why. At least if we can document it now, then we have something specific to discuss with it. So I'm just suggesting that that bit about entering into signed agreements will have to be part of the motion. And my view is that it ought to have been a motion by committee to recommend to council rather than the direction to administration.
Just to respond to that, I'm adverse to entering into signed agreements without further document, further discussion on what we're going to offer in the future. I guess, yeah, it could be for the season, but then there is a document that has, sets the precedent. Well, they offer this to us. Why not continue offering it? I could rescind my motion. If that somebody has it.
If I may, for clarification, agreements could come at a cost. It doesn't mean that we're going to get them free, right? So it's just, we still have to enter an agreement, and that could be a budget discussion for the paper, recycling and the flowers for the chamber. But I think those have to be kind of separate if we want to continue the snow clearing, in my mind. However, I would be okay if you did rescind and somebody just wanted to go forward with the third alternative, because I think that's pretty clear. Councillor Taylor, I really wanted to ask him.
I have concern that if we're just going to go ahead with the motion and it's just for winter. So we order flowers in February, somewhere around there for it to come in. So if we're not going to come back into an agreement, we'll say to March of April, and we agree then that we fund the flowers at the chamber. Have we missed the opportunity? I mean, I think we have to look at it as a whole, right? So either we say that for 2023, we're going to go ahead with all the services, that at a future committee of the whole in 2023, we look at agreements, we look at, what's the value of the nonprofits working out of the Anglican Church, what's the benefit to having the road cleared between Pine Grove and down to the parking lot there. I mean, that's all the stuff we have to consider, but I don't want the Anglican Church and the United Church and the Chamber of Commerce stressing out that council has decided that maybe 3 months from now, we're pulling the rug from out under them. I don't think that's fair.
Right. So I think we're making a recommendation to council, and when we're making decisions, I'd like to, again, and I don't want everybody to get sick of this, but I like to filter things through. Is this good for the community as a whole? What are the costs, not just the physical ones, but the social ramifications? And then is it the right thing to do? So I think there are some boxes this situation does check, but I think in order for us to serve the community as a whole, there are some things that we need to go through. So we have you rescinded your motion, Councillor Wilson?
No.
Okay, so we
No, so my motion will be the third alternative, with the with an additional, note that there'll be 1-year agreements to, yeah.
All right. So that, committee recommends to council that the current services be maintained for Jasper Anglican Church, Jasper United Church, Tourism Jasper, Jasper Bar Chamber of Commerce, and the Canada Post, and enters into signed agreements for 1 year as required by policy F-104. All right. I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? All opposed? That's carried. Should say if there's anyone opposed, if everyone's put their hands up.
All right, well, we are approaching 1 o'clock. Does anyone need a break for a few minutes? A lunch break, a whole lunch break? Do you want to get into the conversation of waste management, or defer that to after lunch and take a recess?
Sorry, Matt?
Yes.
That's actually looking at where we are on the agenda. I think waste management is going to be pretty quick, and then mine will be 7.9 be fairly quick. And the 7.8 will be fairly quick. 7.9 addition. Maryland, where do you think on time for that?
My inclination is that we can move through the rest very quickly and be out of here in 10 minutes. I'd prefer to do that, and then we can give some certainty to the public who might want to reattend for the organization meeting. So my inclination is just get through this agenda now.
All right. Try to hold my line.
No, that's fine. Okay, I can settle maybe. Okay, so that moves us to 7.5, the West Yellowhead Regional Waste Management Authority.
Yes, Deputy Mayor Demota, be very direct on this, as the council is well aware of the Regional Waste Management Authority. We're a partner there with the municipalities in the region. The authority board has recommended that member municipalities support admitting the MD of Greenview to the authority, and in order to support that admission of Greenview as a regular member, the councils of the member municipalities approve an amending agreement, which is attached. The MD of Greenview is part of the conversation because, of course, they are now responsible for Grand Cache, which is now a hamlet in the municipality. Essentially, this is the concept here is that Grand Cache waste would come to the West Yellowhead Regional Waste Management Authority. The board has recommended certain criteria that Greenview has to meet, that they would get voting rights at the commission, at the authority within a year of signing, that they would have to pay a one-time fee of $270,000, that they have also recommended a disposal fee for a certain amount of tonnage, and that the voting percentage for each municipality would change to 20% with the admission of Greenview. So this has been to all the other member municipalities. It has been supported by all the other member municipalities. I think that maybe Edson has a final ratification to do, but this is in line with what their municipalities have done and the recommendation from the board.
Thank you very much. Any debate or questions from council?
Councillor.
Sorry. Did you have a question, Councillor Mellon? Okay, yeah. Councillor Wilson.
No, but I would be willing to make the recommendation that committee recommend council approves the bidding the MD of Greenview to the authority, and that the committee recommend council approve the West Yellowhead Regional Waste Management Authority pending agreement as presented.
All right. Call the question, or is there any debate on it? I want to upset Mayor Smith over there, so I'm going to vote in favor. All in favor?
All right, and opposed, that's carried. Okay, that moves us to 7.8 on the agenda, Clean Energy Improvement Program, Council Wilson.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just over the last 2 years, attending Alberta municipalities, attended a few sessions talking about the Clean Energy Improvement Program, and my apologies for bringing this a year after I learned about it. But the Clean Energy Improvement Program gives homeowners and commercial property owners an opportunity to update and improve their homes with a focus on clean energy. For example, solar panels. Well, let's just use solar panels for now. But then tied to that is the PACE program, where property owners could attach the cost of their improvements to their mortgage, and then payments would be, sorry, not to their mortgage, to their property, and then the finance through the municipality. So there's a few steps that the municipality would need to take take part in this program, and I'm just requesting that at a future, that administration return to council at a future committee of the whole with a report on possibilities that the municipality of Jasper can what did I say? I said, yeah, well, just that return to committee of the whole with a report on the clean energy improvement program and PACE and options for the municipality in the future.
Thank you. Calling out the question.
Yeah, there was a motion there, but yes, anybody has a question.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Your worship? No? Yeah. Does everybody understand the motion? Okay, all in favor? No. Okay, thank you. 7.9, community conversation policy review. Mayor.
Thank you, Pat. Deputy Mayor DeBona. I think it was September of last year, previous council passed a motion to adopt the community conversation model. We've been at it now for about a year, and in my role assigning councillors to various assignments, I just thought that it might be an opportune time to review the community conversation policy and have council confirm whether it is serving our needs the way it could, whether there could be adjustments. We will continue. We do have a policy, and I will be making appointments at the organizational meeting later today, so there's no suggestion of immediate change, but still, after a year of working with that new model, I think it is an appropriate time for a review. And so my motion is that committee direct administration to perform a review of the community conversation policy and report that to a future committee of the whole meeting. So just an opportunity for us to have administration first look to see how it's working for them, bring back a report that we can consider and see whether it's working for us, whether there should be any adjustments to the policy as we move forward.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's a good idea. Okay, does anybody have any questions on that debate? Okay, we'll call this question. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That's carried. Right, agenda item 8, motion action was Mr. Given. Would you like to walk us through?
I will be brief and targeted. Administration believes the following items could be deleted. Policy B17, Community Economic Development Fund that was delivered today. Of course, administration will come back in accordance with direction, but that item could be deleted. JCHC governance review, item number 2, that was delivered here today. The Jasper Museum storage container, administration has had discussion, and we are really waiting for the museum to come back to us if they wish to take any action on that, but administration has done their work, and that could be removed. Sledding at Snapes Hill, administration will bring forward information in the Lions Park redevelopment plan for council consideration, so we believe that item could be removed. Community conversation, environmental responsibility, again, that was delivered here today about the capacity, admin capacity. Petro-Canada item, Director Greathead has provided documentation to Petro-Canada about their need to advance that if they wish to with a request to council, so that item could be removed. And as council is seeing in your calendars, Director Melnichuk has scheduled and invited you to a utility rate model outcomes review workshop. So we believe that that item could be deleted as well. The only other one is JCHE Governance Review 1. It has an October date, and so we would suggest that that would be by December of 2022. So by the end of this year, we'll get that report back to you. So those are the updates that we have for you, Deputy Mayor Jamota.
All right. May I have a motion to delete the items presented and the amendment for the date? Councillor Melvin, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Skipping over number 9, going to number 10. I'm kidding. Councillor, upcoming meetings. Considering we have a organization meeting today, go ahead.
Well, I will very briefly say that something has arisen that is going to take me out of town early tomorrow and returning late, probably on Thursday, so I will not be able to attend the intergovernmental meeting that is scheduled, I think, on Thursday afternoon. If it is the case that we are hosting, and I will be looking to the Deputy Mayor, the Chair. And offline, I have been scheduled to present a welcoming address to the Alberta Foster and Kinship Association on Thursday night, and I will be looking to see if there's a councillor who can take over that duty for me Thursday night. And again, we can discuss that offline, but just to let you know.
Thank you, Your Worship. Any other councillors or upcoming meetings? Because we don't know. Okay. All right, thank you for that. Moving on to agenda item 10, upcoming events. We have, as discussed, intergovernmental meeting October 27th at 2 p.m. We've got the Alberta Recreation and Parks Conference October 27th to the 29th at Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge. Ambassador and Business Awards Gala, November 4th at the Forest Park Hotel at 6 p.m. And No Stone Left Alone, November 7th at the Jasper Cemetery, time to be determined. Remembrance Day is November 11th. And we have our 3rd annual Jasper Legion Mess Gala, November 12th at 5 p.m. at the Royal Canadian Legion. Budget presentations here on November 15th and 16th, 9:30 a.m. Okay, we're doing the day. It's like usually they start at 6 and that's thrown a curveball there. Okay, and then the Jasper Chamber of Commerce General Meeting, November 16th at Pyramid Lake Resort, 7:30 a.m. and METMA, November 23rd, hosted by Marmot Basin. Do we know for sure if that's at Marmot Basin? It is, okay. It's at Marmot Basin. That brings us to agenda item, unless anybody else has any dates to add. Agenda item 11, in camera.
Deputy Mayor, recognizing the time of day, I don't have anything for council for that in-camera session unless council has anything from you. So I think we would dispatch that unless council wants to.
There's no motion to move the camera.
Need a motion to adjourn. Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Oh, yeah, by Alan Keller, Councillor Keller. And that is at 1 p.m. on the. Thank you for all that, everyone that's watching and has watched and will watch. We appreciate your patience.
Before we disconnect, can we quickly discuss when we will reconvene for the organizational meeting? So those who are watching will know when to come back if they choose to do so. Is an hour enough time? At 2 o'clock, we will commence the organization meeting. Okay.
Thank you, Worship.